Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
What's wrong with your head? The young man braked sharply. He jumped out of the car and started yelling at Alice. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. Alice made a frightened face and tears came to her eyes. Are you sick of living? Throwing yourself in front of a cop? Then I'll be responsible for you. The owner of the car couldn't calm down. He gave her an appraising look from head to toe and calmed down a bit. Alice's task is to distract the young man, while her buddy discreetly opens the door and pulls out the purse. They spotted the young man at the gas station and waited for him around the corner. Thomas persuaded Alice to help him just once while his girlfriend was in the hospital. He's the only breadwinner in the family and can't lie on the couch doing nothing. Where did you come from so early? Already with a smile asked the man, not taking his eyes off her beautiful face. But at this moment Alice, all trembling from fear, transfers her look at Thomas, cautiously opening the door and slipping his hand behind the handbag carelessly thrown on the seat. The stranger turns around sharply, but Thomas has already managed to get a good distance away. You're saying you didn't do it on purpose? He grabs Alice's hand. We're going to the police. So you're a badger, the young man concludes with undisguised anger. Alice tries to pull her hand away. The word police makes her heart sink. There's no way she can go to the police. She's unregistered and undocumented. If he takes her to the police now, it'll be the end of her. I have nothing to do with this young man. She started to pity and plead. But the man opened the door, shoved the girl into the car, locked the doors just in case. He took a couple steps and started to fall to the ground. Alice saw Thomas behind him with a brick in his right hand. He quickly grabbed the key fob and unlocked the car. Thomas, are you crazy? We don't need to go to jail for murder. Alice stammered, her eyes squared in horror. Thomas leaned over to the man. He's breathing. He'll live. I put him down gently. Let's go before he wakes up. Thomas ran forward. Alice ran after him. They ran out into the roadway, trying to leave the scene of their crime as quickly as possible. Thomas turned his head and didn't notice the high curve, but tripped. He lost his balance and fell. Alice jumped to him. She knelt down. Thomas' eyes were closed. He didn't move or make a sound. Alice screamed loudly. She tried to rouse him. A girl walked by. She helped Alice call an ambulance. Alice met Thomas when her bag with money and documents was stolen from her at the train station. Not knowing what to do, she paced the platform with her eyes brimming with tears, watching passengers boarding the train, presenting their passports and tickets. Her ticket was in her bag, which disappeared in a second. All she had to do was turn her back. I don't know. I don't have anywhere to go. Thomas is gone, and his girlfriend's in the hospital. I'm staying with them temporarily. I don't have the key either. Alice struggled to get her words out. She was clutching her purse to her chest, determined not to leave a clue. I see. The girl sighed heavily. Foreign. She started the car and carefully drove forward. You'll live at my place for now. Your acquaintance will be discharged. You'll move in with her. My name is Olivia, by the way. She introduced herself. Alice. Alice sniffed her nose and tried to put a smile on her face. Let's get acquainted. Alice told Olivia her playful story. She told it to the best of her ability, holding nothing back. She was getting ready to leave. She was sure the girl didn't want any trouble and wouldn't leave her alone. I work in a restaurant. We'll go to work together tomorrow. I'll see if I can get you a job as a waiter. You'll get a little internship. You look impressive. I think they'll hire you. Olivia reassured her and stroked Alice's head. How old are you? I hope you're of legal age. Soon it will be 19. Still worried, answered Alice. Do you want coffee? The new acquaintance asked. I will, Alice answered. Olivia stopped the car near a small restaurant. This is where we will work. Olivia answered Alice's mute question. Sit here for a while. Olivia left her alone. Alice sat down on the edge of the couch and began to look at the restaurant from the inside. Beautiful tablecloths on the tables, massive chandeliers, stairs to the second floor, colorful napkins on each table. The restaurant is still empty. It's not opening time yet. Alice didn't notice how Olivia approached her. Next to her stood a man with a look of displeasure on his face. This girl right here, she's my cousin. I can vouch for her as myself. You say the papers were stolen. The man looked at Alice from head to toe. Stolen, Olivia answered for her. I'll explain her situation to the chief. Hopefully he'll understand. We'll get the paperwork back, she continued. Arthur asked for a table for tonight. I hope I can talk to him about my sister. For now, let her practice carrying the trays. A week later, Alice was trusted to go out and serve customers. Good evening. You've already chosen. She asked the duty phrase, which just flew from the teeth, like a learned mechanism. And only when the man takes his eyes off the menu and looks at her. A chill runs down Alice's spine. A compulsive fear envelops her entire body. At the table sits the man who had been hit on the head by Thomas and from whom they had stolen the purse. What an unexpected encounter, he says and leans back on the couch. I'm sorry, you must have me confused with someone else, Alice said pathetically, pretending that she had never met the young man before. Remembering the details of their meeting on the road, she was ashamed and unpleasant. What are you saying? The man made surprised eyes. I recognize your face even with my eyes closed. Where's my purse? He gestured for Alice to bend over and whispered in her ear. If a single piece of paper goes missing from my bag, one call, you'll be in jail for a long time, and you'll spend the last few years in the slammer. He turned away from Alice and turned to his companion. Darling, have you chosen yet? Alice took the order. She turned around and walked out of the hall on wobbly legs. Immediately approached the administrator and began to remove her uniform. What happened? Olivia asked in surprise. Just yesterday, she had been promoted to administrator. Olivia was very proud and happy that she was able to get this position. She was tired of working as a waiter. She was tired of running with trays in the hall and adjusting to the mood of each client. A very scary story happened. If I don't quit, they'll fire me anyway. The man you asked to serve you is the man Thomas hit over the head, Alice muttered. What? Olivia's eyes almost popped out of her head. Do you know who that is? You got it up to your ass. She waved her hand and shook her head. I thought I'd get in trouble for you. Sit here. Anyway, you have to finish your shift, and then we'll see. She looked at Alice sternly and went out. Alice sat down obediently on the chair. In front of her eyes stood the angry face of the young man. She sighed, put her hands on her knees, and calmly waited for the verdict. I wonder who he was. Not the chief of police of the neighborhood, I hope. Alice spit over her left shoulder 3 times. That's all I need. If I'd known there'd be trouble like this, I never would have contacted you. Now I'm hanging on by a thread. Olivia shook her head. Go up to the 2nd floor, to the principal's office. Remember, I vouched for you. How you behave will determine how I stay here. I'd already explained everything to Arthur. He wants to talk to you in person. Watch me. Olivia wagged her finger. For the first time, Alice saw fear and worry in her older friend's eyes. I'll do my best, Alice said and headed for the principal's office. The main thing is not to let Olivia down. She's good, and she's been there for me in my time of need. Why do I have to get everyone in trouble? My sister's always trying to get me out of here. She sent me to go to school. I hoped I'd get in. I'd get a dormitory. During my studies, I'd meet a guy, get married, and never go back to my parents' apartment. And I was only 1 grade short. And of course, I didn't get into the budget. I had to return home. The station stole my documents. Go to work and remember my kindness. He could barely contain his laughter as he watched her hurry out of the office. Tugging at the handle, it wouldn't budge. Finally, Alice figured out to turn it down. She opened the door and dashed out, heels blazing. There's something about her. I'll help her get her papers back, and then we'll see. Diligent. That's the kind of employee I need. I can always fire her. What's up? Olivia waited for her friend on the 1st floor, praying to God it was a bloodbath. As long as Arthur didn't jump up and change his mind. When Olivia told the chief the sad story about Alice, she told him that she couldn't get past Alice's plight, knowing full well that she could get in trouble for feeling sorry for a complete stranger. Arthur believed Olivia and promised not to take harsh measures. really in 1 second made a 180-degree turn and changed his opinion to the opposite. So far, so good, I apologized. I said I'm not a criminal. I swallowed my words and began to hastily recount my conversation with Chief Alice. Well, that's good. If he wanted to fire you, he would have done it yesterday. I've known him a long time. Arthur's not going to bend over backwards for anyone. Olivia exhaled and smiled. You were born with the shirt on your back. Just don't let me down. There's a lot of temptation here. You need to be able to stop in time and do not break the wood. Arthur called Alice into his office. Here, he handed her her papers and her bag. Where did you get this? Alice still couldn't believe her eyes. I'm a magician, he laughed. My neighbor is the director of the train station. The janitor was cleaning the square this morning and found your bag. He took the fine to the station duty officer. Of course, there was no money in the bag, but thieves don't need documents. Arthur looked at Alice with undisguised interest. This is fantastic. Alice grabbed her bag. I don't even know how to thank you. She looked at her documents and could not hide her joy. Passport, birth certificate, high school diploma. Everything was safe and sound. Alice even cried from the pleasure. But I don't need to get all wet here. You should be happy with what you have, not sad about what you don't. Let's just say you're a lucky man. A woman's tears hadn't worked on Arthur in 6 years. Not since he divorced his wife. But Alice's sobbing managed to melt his icy heart and sympathize with him. Thank you very much. Can I go? Barely holding back tears of joy, she said quietly. For some reason, I didn't want to let the girl go. To look at her genuine joy gave him great pleasure. But there was no reason to keep Alice in his office any longer. Go. Arthur nodded and praised himself for his cleverness. And try not to lose anything else. I will try. Smiling all over her face, she replied. Alice was in a great mood. She waltzed around the room with a tray in her hands, receiving tips from not greedy customers and feeling absolutely happy, beautiful, charming, and even lucky. So a few days passed. Arthur gives the order to book a table for 9 people. Alice served the company. All evening, Arthur's friend pelted Alice with compliments. He made jokes in her direction, shot his eyes at her, and openly courted her, trying not to let her leave his table, even for a few minutes. Alice only smiled, kept silent, and nodded when all the guests were already tipsy. The young man, not seeing the object of his adoration in the hall, went in search of her. He found Alice in the back room. He made a bold move on her. He pinned her against the wall and started fooling around. The price of admission is 1 passionate kiss, he said. Stop it right now, Alice whispered, shrugging off his insolent harassment. Alice pressed herself into the wall and looked at her beau with square eyes of fear. Don't be afraid of me. It won't hurt at all. It will even be pleasant. Alice answered nothing, and John was tired of trying to persuade her. He put his hands against the wall. He put them on either side of Alice's shoulders. He tilted his head so their lips were at the same level. Stop it right now. I'm going to scream. Alice began to plead with him. He ignored her pitiful cries. John pressed his whole body against her. A few seconds later, Alice heard the sound of tearing. She didn't even realize it was her new blouse snapping at the seams. Buttons flew to the floor, flying in all directions. Help! Alice shouted before John's lips covered her mouth. A moment later, strong hands pulled John away. Alice opened her eyes and saw the chief's angry face. He was staring at his friend with contempt. What's going on here? Why are you harassing my employees? What's it to you? Go to your Elizabeth. Don't stop us from talking to Alice, John grumbled in a disgruntled tone. Arthur took off his jacket and threw it over Alice's shoulders. Are you all right? He wheezed, trying to pull the halves of his jacket together to cover Alice's half-naked body. How can I go out in the hall like this? She wailed, looking at herself from all sides and trying to find at least one button on her torn blouse. I'll take you home, Arthur replied in a voice that brooked no objection. And who will serve my tables? Alice continued to lament, still trying to make herself look good. You don't have to worry about that now. We're going home, Arthur replied in a confident tone. She's not going anywhere with you. Elizabeth is waiting for you in the hall, John grumbled angrily. He lunged at Arthur with his fists, but knelt down with his hands wrapped behind his back. "If you don't stop, I'll get security. You'll be forcibly removed from this place. You've got your eye on her." John grinned. Alice took off her jacket and handed it to the chief. Holding the hem of her blouse with one hand, she headed for the locker room. Leaving the young men alone and not wanting to get into an altercation, John glared unkindly at Arthur. His face twisted, and he sneered. "You want a young body? None of your business," Arthur snarled. John had no choice but to go into the hall. He wasn't going to fight his rival on his territory, but he didn't want to give Arthur the girl. "While you're here sipping your wine, your Arthur's not shy about hitting on his new waitress. He's going home with her right now." He turned to a tipsy Elizabeth. "Oh, please. I hope it's not that uncouth redneck you've got your eye on. She stinks of stupidity and stupidity from a mile away," laughed Elizabeth. "You shouldn't laugh." John put his hand on her shoulder. "I think he has a crush on her. And I think, too." John looked wistfully out the panoramic window. The sight of the city at night made him feel sad. His fists itched with anger at Arthur. "Damn him for showing up at the worst possible moment," John muttered. "Arthur, maybe you shouldn't see me off. It's embarrassing in front of your friends." Alice tried to persuade him again. She wanted to be alone to calm down. Get her thoughts in order. Consult with Olivia after all. "My friends are adults. They'll find their own way home." "What about your girlfriend?" "I'm embarrassed for her. She kept complaining." "We'll deal with our girlfriend ourselves. You don't have to worry about her. Elizabeth will be fine." Arthur grinned. Arthur put Alice in the car in the back seat and sat next to her. He gave the cab driver his home address. Alice looked at her boss with frightened eyes. "Don't worry, I won't do you anything bad, unless you want me to." He answered the girl's mute question. "Arthur, please take me home. I'm not going to you." Arthur turned his head and looked at Alice carefully. He still hoped that she was just putting on a brave face. Alice lowered her eyes, wrinkled her forehead, and nervously bit her lower lip. "She's so young," Arthur thought to himself as he watched her blush and try to get rid of his presence as quickly as possible. Alice loudly dictated her address. The cab driver turned his head and addressed Arthur. "Where are we going?" "Take us to the address," the girl called. After these words, Arthur put his hand on her knee. But Alice took it away and turned away to the window. It seemed to Arthur that the cab driver took them away in 20 minutes. They didn't want to part at all. "Thank you, Arthur." I didn't want to let her go, just in an ultimatum form. He quickly paid the driver and followed her out. "I'm afraid I'm intruding, but I'd like to ask for a cup of coffee." Arthur's blocking the door. "I want to make sure you're going to be all right. I'll have a cup of coffee and go home with peace of mind," Arthur said in his usual commanding tone, leaving Alice no chance to refuse. "All right." Alice sighed heavily, took out the key, and opened the door. "Tell me about yourself." Taking a sip of freshly brewed coffee, Arthur suddenly asked a question. "Why do you need it?" Alice shrugged her shoulders. Certainly, the chief's behavior was putting her in a stupor. Alice wanted to say goodbye to him, send him away and be alone. She glanced defiantly at her watch. It was still 2 hours before Olivia arrived. "Well, if I'm asking, I need it." Alice told me how her parents had died, how she and her sister had been left all alone, how she was almost taken away to an orphanage, how her sister went to work early because they needed something to eat. Then the sister got married. Nothing interesting. Alice concluded. "Do you got a boyfriend?" "No," she answered confidently. "Thanks for the coffee." Arthur got up from his chair. "I'm going home, and you should get some rest. I'm sorry about what happened. I'll talk to John. I promise he won't come near you again." Arthur leaned down, pressed his lips to her cheek, and kissed her gently. The brief touch burned her cheek as if he put a hot mug of boiling water on it. Alice shuddered and swallowed loudly. "Goodbye," she whispered, her tongue completely numb. Arthur paced in his office from one corner to the other. He was like a tiger in a cage. Today, he could hardly sleep. The image of Alice was in his mind's eye, her torn blouse, her lacy white brow, with one strap torn off. That little girl had taken over his thoughts. For some reason, he wanted to see her again and again, to be always near to help, to support, to lend a helping hand. and today Elizabeth showed up at the restaurant at lunchtime. She asked the receptionist to be served by Alice. As a result, she had a scandal, called her a slob. She wrote a complaint and demanded that she be fired. I had to invite Elizabeth into my office. I had to calm her down for a long time. Asked her to calm down and stop yelling. It was a bad idea to celebrate a friend's birthday at her restaurant. Now Elizabeth would not rest until she had achieved her goal. Arthur heard a knock, and then Alice appeared in the doorway. "May I?" "Come in." "Arthur, it's really not my fault. Your girlfriend started throwing tissues at me and calling me names. I had no choice but to leave." I know. Arthur sighed heavily. "Never mind, I'll fix this misunderstanding." He walked over to Alice and took her chin in his hand. He scrutinized her pale face. "She's jealous because she sees you as a rival, and I can't help it. I think I'm falling in love." Arthur felt Alice's fear in his skin, barely restraining himself from pouncing on her and scaring her. His chest was short of air, his body was shuddering with excitement. "I can't help it," he heard his own hoarse voice. Arthur put his fingers around her head and kissed her lips passionately. Not expecting such a turn, Alice opened her lips. His tongue entered her mouth and began to do something unimaginable. Alice lost all possibility of resistance. With his right hand, he put his arm around her waist and pulled her tightly against his body. His left hand moved and held the back of her head tightly, giving her no chance to pull away. "Is everything okay?" he wheezed in her ear. He didn't even think about letting go of her tight embrace. "Yeah, I don't know." Her voice was just as hoarse. "Who knows?" he asked, pulling away slightly and looking at her face. "Am I disturbing you?" Elizabeth's voice was commanding. Her face twisted with anger. Bright sparks flew from her eyes. Her gaze was hostile, angered, irritated, and intensely unpleasant. Arthur took a step back. He noticed how Alice, her face red as an overripe tomato, began tucking loose strands of hair behind her ear. Then she pulled up her skirt, coughed, and said, "Don't ever do that again, Arthur." And without raising her eyes to Elizabeth, she stalked out of the office. "Congratulations," Elizabeth clapped her hands defiantly. "What have you come to? Sleeping with a Lamita? Look at her. She smells like country manure from a mile away. None of our friends are gonna give you a hand, because you'll be soaked in that stuff yourself." She came closer to Arthur and slapped him on the cheek with all her might. "What do you think you're doing?" Arthur grabbed his cheek. "You and I have worked things out. Why did you come back again?" "I wanted to cement our truce with you and invite you out tonight, but I see I'm too late. I realized at the party that you had a crush on her. When John went after her, you couldn't hide your annoyance. I hate to break it to you, but John has a crush on this foreign brat just like you. I don't know how you're gonna share her." The words came out of Elizabeth like a powder keg. She couldn't remember her rage and anger. She just couldn't stop. She wanted to hit Arthur with hurtful words, to tell him that this little bitch was not his format at all. "Elizabeth, you've obviously forgotten that you and I broke up. We decided to stay just good friends. That was your initiative, by the way." Arthur was still holding his cheek. "I changed my mind," she shrugged in surprise. "I'd had a lot of time to think. I'd had a lot of time to sort myself out. Now I'm absolutely sure of my only right decision. I need you. Is your decision to propose to me still on the table?" She stared at Arthur with wide-open eyes. Elizaveta was 200% sure that having put him in front of the fact, Arthur would not be able to refuse. He would be delighted and propose to her again. "Elizabeth, you know the saying. Strike while the iron is hot. When I proposed to you, that's when you should have accepted. And now," Arthur paused. He didn't want to offend with his categorical refusal, but he wasn't about to give false hope. "And now you are carried away by this sweat." Elizabeth helped to finish his thought. "Let's call things by their proper names. This girl is worth 3 rubles at the peasant market. I can't even think who you've traded me for." She laughed hysterically. "Elizabeth, let's not insult each other. Remember, I won't hurt the girl, and don't come to the restaurant and put sticks in her Calivia. I repeat, for the intelligent and especially gifted. Alice is not to be touched. She's been through enough in this life. I won't let anyone hurt her." "I heard you." Elizabeth gave Arthur a cold stare. She squinted her eyes, smirked, and left the office without saying goodbye. Elizabeth hurried down the hall. When she saw Alice, she came almost right up to her. She grabbed a flute from the table and threw it on the floor. The flute shattered into tiny fragments. A hard line flickered in her smug smile. "You can complain to your boss." Slut said that the glass was broken by his fiancé. Satisfied with her prank, she left the restaurant with her head held high. If you're going to react that badly to all the customers who are just making a big fuss, you don't have the nerve. Just be quiet, agree, and ignore it. Olivia calmed her friend down and gave her another admonition. "That's easy for you to say. I'm just sick of her. To be honest, I'm afraid of her. I should probably look for a new place of work." Alice carefully picked up the shards from the floor. Her mood was ruined. Her head was spinning from everything that was going on. "Do you think it would be better somewhere else?" "I don't know." Alice sighed heavily. "But it's unbearable to work under these conditions," she said thoughtfully. "John, I'm offering you a great option. We'll both be better off. You get revenge on Arthur for your humiliation. What a patron he's turned out to be. I'm pitching your idea of opening a brew pub to my dad. Don't worry, if I take the job, they'll give you a long-term lease on the place. I'll kill the girl, she'll quit the restaurant, and you're so kind and sympathetic. You apologize to her. You say it's all the alcohol's fault. It'll never happen again. You're sympathetic to her situation. You help her get a job, and then you can do whatever you want with her. I won't be interested, but when this girl leaves Arthur and doesn't show her face, he'll come running back to me like a sweetheart. That's when I'll get even with him." Elizabeth raised her nose arrogantly and grinned wryly. "Arthur will be sorry he did this to me. Let's see how he will beg for my forgiveness. And then I'll think about it, whether or not to forgive him. It's not a bad plan. I've forgotten to think about this Alice thing, though. If only Arthur could be told that friends don't do that. I understand if he said, 'I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry. That's my girl.' But now he's all over me. The girl is interesting. Can you imagine Arthur's face if I come to your birthday party with her?" John said dreamily. "My birthday is in exactly 1 month. We don't have much time left. Tomorrow, I'm going to a restaurant with my girlfriends. Tonight, you take a beautiful bouquet of flowers. You go to her and tearfully ask for forgiveness. You don't need to learn how to say nice words. Start courting her unobtrusively. Make her believe you. When she can't take my pressure and leaves the restaurant, we'll put her in such a hole that she won't get out of it without your support." Elizabeth concluded and raised her index finger up for convincing. "And when you get tired of her, let her go back to her village. There's no need to repel other people's fiancés. Alice, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me that night. All the fault of your beauty, youth, and too much alcohol. I just can't find a place for myself." Nizkash drove up to the restaurant several times. "I wanted to see you and apologize. I couldn't stop feeling ashamed. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. Tired of feeling like a scoundrel and a scoundrel. Today, I couldn't stand it. I got up the courage." John handed Alice a huge bouquet of white roses. Alice looked at John and could not understand anything. Not expecting such a turn, she was confused and felt as if not in her plate. Offend a young man who sincerely repented and apologized did not want to. Alice smiled and accepted the bouquet. "Don't worry, John. I understand everything and I don't hold a grudge. You can sleep well. I want to make it up to you and invite you to sit in a calm and friendly atmosphere so we can get to know each other better, just to talk. I wouldn't expect much more than that." John looked at Alice with a guilty face, trying to understand her mood and draw conclusions for himself. "No, John. Thank you very much for the flowers, but that's quite enough. I'm not going anywhere with you. I've forgiven you, and I don't hold any grudges. You can sleep well." Alice was about to leave, but John grabbed her arm. "Alice, if you ever need my help, here's my card. Call me any time of the day or night." He handed her his card. "Thank you." Alice took the card from his hands and put it in her pocket. She was sure that she would never need it in her life. Alice was not going to ask for help from the man who had almost raped her and did not even allow such a thought. Alice walked into the hall with a bouquet of white roses. Olivia's eyes widened beyond belief. What a number! What a beautiful bouquet! He didn't say a word, and then he showed up. "It's a little suspicious, but it's a beautiful bouquet. Congratulations." "Olivia," he just apologized. He slipped me his card and said I could always count on his help. Alice looked at the flowers and couldn't get enough of the beauty. She had never been given such expensive and luxurious bouquets in her life. Olivia went up to the principal's office. "Arthur, your fiancé is in the hall with 2 other bridesmaids. I'm afraid there's going to be another huge scandal tonight. She won't calm down. I've decided to kill the girl, but she's not gonna do it. Call Diana at work. Tell Alice to come up to my office. Try to do without Alice until she arrives," he said tiredly. "Okay," Olivia replied. "It's a thankless task to sort out who's right and who's wrong. The most effective position at this point is compromise." Olivia, as an administrator, could not allow squabbling, swearing, and fighting in the hall. She went downstairs and sent her friend to the principal's office. "You wanted to see me?" Alice, her face pale with excitement, appeared in the doorway. "I did," Arthur replied briefly. "I invite you to the movies. 100 years have not been in a movie theater. I want you to keep me company. No objections are accepted. Gather. We leave in 10 minutes. I hope that's enough time for you to change." "I can't. It wouldn't be very convenient for me. There's your fiancée sitting in the hall." Alice can barely make it out. "First of all, she's not my fiancée. Our relationship is long past. We broke up. Secondly, you realize that she came to make another scandal, but we're not going to give her that pleasure. Let her be disappointed today and suffocate from her own bile. Third, we'll have a great time. I've been wanting to ask you out for a long time. Go for it. You won't regret it." Arthur came close to her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Okay." Alice took his hands away and moved away to a safe distance. "Go get dressed. I'll meet you in the car in 10 minutes, he smiled. Elizabeth was in a foul mood. For 2 hours now, she had been looking for her victim, ready to pounce on her and crush her like a little bud. But Alice was gone, disappeared in an unknown direction. Elizabeth deliberately walked around the room a few times. She went up to the office to Arthur, visited the restroom, looked even in the back rooms. Alice was nowhere to be found. When she asked her question, the receptionist Olivia answered that Alice had asked to leave for a few days for family reasons. The evening was finally ruined. The only thing left to do was to get drunk and go home. Having achieved nothing and disappointed in her far-reaching plans, Elizabeth ordered another bottle of wine, took out her phone and dialed the number. How was the movie? Arthur drove the car confidently down the wide highway. "I liked it," Alice confessed honestly. "Me too," he replied. "Why don't we stop somewhere for dinner?" "Arthur, I've got to get home." Alice started to argue. They had a lovely evening, but the image of Elizabeth did not leave her for a minute. Alice kept seeing her angry, glittering eyes in front of her, cheeks flaming with an angry blush and an arrogant look, not willing to consider the opinions of others. "I told you, as long as you're with me, no one will dare to hurt you. Let Elizabeth at least suffocate from her own anger." "Alice, I have very serious intentions." After saying that, Arthur pulled off to the side of the road. He stopped the car and turned to her with his whole body. "I have a proposition for you. Let's pack all your things and you move in with me. Believe me, it's the only right decision. Elizabeth, once she finds out we're living together, she'll finally calm down and stop stalking you. We'll just leave her no choice." "I can't," she said without hesitation. "Why not? What's with all this adolescent maximalism? We're adults. I like you a lot. I think about you all the time. I want you always to be there for me." He looked questioningly at her pale face. "Really? I'm not ready. I need to think about it." Alice turned away and bit her lower lip. "How long will you think about it?" Arthur stood his ground. "A day, 2. Can it be 3? She interrupted him. "But no more," he answered firmly. Walking Alice to the door, Arthur made himself that this was the last time. Soon he will move Alice to his home and will no longer look out and search for her with his eyes in the hall. She would always be near and no one would dare to say even one bad word to her. Arthur just opened his mouth, deciding to ask for a cup of coffee. But suddenly he swallowed loudly and tried to gather his thoughts. John was standing outside Alice's apartment building, ringing the intercom with determination. "What kind of surprise meeting?" "John, if I understand you correctly, you are here by chance." Arthur grinned. took Alice's elbow and continued. You didn't come to see my girlfriend, did you? Or after giving her a bouquet of roses, decided not to stop there? It's not nice to steal girls from your friends. I didn't see this coming. John was confused at first, trying to digest the information Arthur had given him in his mind. He just stared dumbfounded at his friend, then slowly turned his gaze to Alice. Alice, is it true? Are you and Arthur together? He asked with a stretched face. John didn't even believe his ears at first. Arthur's words hit him where it hurt. He was already making plans and calculating profits. John had high hopes for the opening of a new brewery, but sadly, not all dreams are destined to come true. Arthur let go of his elbow and put his arm around Alice's waist. In the near future, Alice will move in with me. Really, dear? The door opened. On the threshold, they were met by a happy Elizabeth, and Alice had a chill running down her spine. Alice listened silently to other people's conversations. She smiled, pretended to be interested, agreed, and shook her head in agreement. Arthur immediately introduced Alice to everyone as his girlfriend. The whole evening was near her and practically did not leave her for a minute. The evening was coming to an end. Unnoticeably, everyone went somewhere else. Arthur also went away for a minute. John sat down with Alice. How's married life? Arthur does not offend. Fine, she said. Where's Arthur? I don't know. He said he had to go away for a while. Alice smiled. I'm sure he's with Elizabeth. That couple can't live without each other for long. John tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. What makes you think that? Alice looked at him incredulously. He took Alice's hand and led her to the second floor. Not understanding why she was doing this, Alice followed John in silence. He pushed on the handle. When the door didn't open, he knocked loudly, shook his head and knocked again. Then again, the doors wouldn't open. Why are you doing this? I saw Elizabeth and Arthur come into this room with my own eyes, John whispered in his ear. Elizabeth opened the door about a minute later. She was wearing the shirt Alice had ironed that morning. Alice turned around and walked briskly toward the door. John followed her. Alice, to be honest, I didn't expect this. I thought they were just talking. Please call me a cab. She struggled to find her shoes. I'll walk you out. I don't want to leave you alone. Don't. Tell Arthur I went home. Okay, John answered. Alice couldn't sleep until the morning, still hoping that Arthur will come, explain, say that there was a terrible misunderstanding, that she misunderstood everything and between them there was nothing. But Arthur still did not come home for the night, not call, did not write, and did not ask how she got home. Alice had already packed all of her things. She didn't want to leave without talking to Arthur. After all, why should she run away from his house like a naughty kitten? Alice decided to look into his eyes, to draw a conclusion and realize that she had made another mistake. It was good that everything happened now, when she had not yet had time to fall in love, although I didn't want to break up. But she was not going to close her eyes to all this ugliness. Alice saw through the window as Elizabeth's car drove up. The passenger door opened. Arthur got out first. Elizabeth jumped out after him. They talked about something nice. Elizabeth kissed him on the cheek. He waved to her and went into the building. Hello, Arthur looked at the 2 bags he had packed. Only a blind man could miss them by the front door. Are you leaving? Yes, Alice answered calmly. Although the storm was already raging in her soul, it was not easy to control herself. May I ask why? Arthur, as if nothing had happened, went into the hall and tiredly sank down on the sofa. He closed his eyes and sighed heavily. I think it's clear enough. I think we were too hasty. I should not have moved to you so quickly. Alice could barely hold back her tears, but she decided that Arthur would not see them. She wouldn't give him that pleasure, but she'd rather cry on Olivia's shoulder. Her friend would understand, support her, and give her advice. You're not even gonna ask me how I spent the night? I know where you were. Elizabeth left you in good hands. What claim can you have against me? I have many, as you say, complaints against you. You didn't even ask me how I was feeling or what happened to me. Arthur paused, but then he continued. I felt sick. I threw up. Elizabeth called an ambulance. They took me to the infectious disease ward. They pumped me full of fluids. I thought I would die. And next to me was not my favorite girl, And Elizabeth, she did not leave me. She came with me to the hospital. She waited for me to be admitted, wrote a note to let me go home, picked me up. She brought me back to her place. I slept for a while this morning, and when I woke up, she took me straight to you. And you didn't even ask where I was or what was wrong with me. I'm sorry if I was wrong. I went looking for you. I knocked on the door. Elizabeth opened it. She was wearing your shirt, and you were naked on the bed. What was I supposed to think? Elizabeth told me you ran downstairs like a mad woman. You didn't ask. You ran off with John. That's wonderful. I'm lying, almost dying. And she took off and ran away. It's just a kindergarten, Arthur shrugged. His voice was imbued with a hint of irritation and anger. I just can't figure it out. Why she took off your shirt and put it on herself. You don't think that's weird? I don't know. Maybe I stained her dress when I was puking and throwing up. How many shirts like that in town? Maybe it wasn't my shirt. Arthur poured his negativity onto Alice, holding her responsible and practically holding her accountable for her behavior. I hope we talked. We got it all figured out. Can I go now? If God forbid, you get sick again, you already know who you can turn to. Elizabeth will always help you, and I'll take what I can get. Alice got up from the chair and headed for the exit. She got dressed, started rolling out her bag. You still haven't got the message that nothing happened between us. We're just good friends, Arthur shouted in frustration. No, why? It has come to me that in this triangle, I turned out to be an extra corner. If your friends decided not to inform me, did not call, did not warn, your Elizabeth saw perfectly well that I was bad and unpleasant, but did not consider it necessary. So you and I are just not on the same path. Sorry. Alice took hold of her bag again. What do you want? You do realize that I can just fire you from your job. Where will you go without education and experience? Arthur didn't want Alice to leave. That's not the reaction he expected from her. Of course, he was terribly angry. In a difficult moment, not his favorite girl, but Elizaveta was next to him. This fact did not give him peace. Elizabeth's constant reminders that Alice had not even called once made him nervous, psychotic, angry, perhaps also make some mistakes. Don't worry, I'll quit on my own, muttered Alice. She opened the door. Can I help you? Arthur shouted angrily. No, thank you. Save your strength. You'll need it. Go on then. Just know that I'm not going to chase you for the rest of my life. Arthur was standing by the window. He saw a cab pull up. The chauffeur got out and started helping Alice load her bags. Arthur could barely contain himself from jumping out into the street. Stop. Bring her back home. But he decided to calm down, to rest, to sort out his thoughts. And tomorrow, at work, already calmly talk. Nothing. Let him think about his behavior. It's time to grow up, not to run away from problems, he said out loud. Arthur was indeed very tired. Sleepless night, trips. Thank God Elizabeth was always there for him. If it wasn't for her, he might still be in the hospital when he felt much better. Elizabeth took him to her house, put him to bed. I should have called Alice, Arthur thought to himself. Oh, come on. We'll sort it out tomorrow. Nothing. Tomorrow I'll recover. I'll talk to her. I will explain how to behave as a favorite girl. With these thoughts, Arthur closed his eyes and quietly fell asleep. Make up. Olivia, listening to Alice's confused story, made her conclusion and stroked her head. I don't want anything. If he doesn't realize that his friends are provoking me, then he and I are out of his way. Elizabeth couldn't tell me he was sick. She called an ambulance. John didn't say anything. He could have called me. Why? Alice sighed heavily. I've written a resignation letter. You'll give it to Arthur tomorrow. I don't want to discuss this topic anymore. Arthur told me in plain text that he will fire me. I'll make it easy for him. I'll fire myself. Nothing. I'll get a job somewhere. Arthur's not the only employer in town. What if he doesn't pay your wages? Make you work 2 weeks? Then it's on his conscience. Alice wiped away a tear with her hand. But I won't go back to the restaurant again. And I won't go back to him either. Arthur had already looked out into the hall several times. He hoped to see Alice's upset face. He was 100% sure that she roared all night and at work will walk like a sleepy fly and just peck her nose. Arthur, we've had a personnel change. Instead of Alice, I called Olivia in today. Here, Olivia handed him an A4 sheet. I don't get it. Arthur read the resignation letter carefully. With each word he read, the hair on the back of his neck moved more and more. His cheekbones were moving, and curses and profanities were flying off his tongue. What kindergarten? I handed over a piece of paper. She scribbled a statement. And who's gonna do 2 weeks' work for her? What does she think? What does she expect? Arthur took a lot of air into his lungs. He tried to look calm and reasonable, but it was difficult for him. That's how she decided to say goodbye to me, put a fat cross, and go nowhere. Everything ended quickly before even having time to begin. And the main thing, inflated the problem on a flat place. She made up for herself, not God knows what. She hid, cut off all ends, and went on the easiest way. And in fact, more than sure, that Mrs. cries at night in a pillow, but when we meet, she'll smile, pretend everything's fine, even great. Arthur wanted to call her unflattering words, but instead, he suddenly asked a question that interested him. How is she? I thought it would be worse. She's doing great, Olivia smiled. Good for her. I can't afford it. I wanted to talk to her today. I was hoping she'd calm down. She slept through the night, thought it over. I mean, it's not like it was a big deal. Arthur put a sour smile on his face. He even tried to make jokes. He didn't expect Alice to make such a pass at him. Without thinking, Arthur grabbed his coat. He twisted around, trying to find his scarf, but he couldn't find it and decided to do without it. Hi. He breathed out a sigh of relief when Alice opened the door. We need to talk, he continued. Well, what are you imagining? I'm imagining things. Alice's eyes were shining so brightly. Arthur wished he'd worn sunglasses. Not me, he smiled sweetly. Without asking permission, Arthur gently pushed her aside, stepped into the apartment, and closed the door. Do you think you did the right thing? He took off his shoes. Arthur, you don't need to appeal to my conscience. Believe me, I have a clean conscience. I won't come back to you. I won't work in your restaurant either. And now I'm sorry. I'm going on a job interview. Already? Arthur's face is all stretched out. For what? At a men's clothing boutique. What? Arthur hissed. You're not going to work in a boutique, he said categorically. First of all, I'm only going for a job interview and no one has taken me anywhere yet. And secondly, you're nobody to me. Elizabeth will be the one to tell you what to do. I hope she'll listen to your restrictions. Alice sneered. Alice, I don't recognize you. Where has my obedient girl gone? Remember, my dear, it's impossible to live a perfect life. At any minute, something unexpected can happen. There are different situations in life. The main thing is to save your face, not to sink, not to talk nonsense and chuputra. What a wonderful thing to say. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to save face. Though I am young, but I will not allow any Elizabeth. Laugh at myself. The theatrical production, which he and John played for me, I appreciated. Well done. Seriously approached the issue. Worked with a soul coherently. And if you still have not gotten to you, I appreciated their work and put a grade of excellent. I'll deal with Elizabeth. Arthur grumbled. You go deal with it. Forget about us. Elizabeth, what kind of a circus are you putting on? Wearing my shirt. You locked yourself in your room? Without any greeting, Arthur started telling her off on the phone. Then do good to people after that, snorted Elizabeth. What else did your Alice tell you? Just the truth. Let's make a deal. You don't mess with me anymore. Remember, I have a girlfriend who loves me. You don't have to think you're the center of the earth. Why did I listen to you? Going to your party was a bad idea. Are you done? No. There's only one question on my mind. Why did I get sick alone? Elizabeth, I don't want to believe you're capable of such a thing. But if I find out you had a hand in it, God forbid, I will never give you my hand again. Your obsession is starting to annoy me. I really want to believe you. Arthur dropped the call. He didn't want to continue the conversation. His sixth sense told him that Alice was right about a lot of things. Girl, what do you think? What better tie will suit this shirt? Arthur watched as Alice served, most likely a regular customer. See, with what trepidation she picked up a tie. Smiling, and he just devoured her eyes, tried to woo her and threw transparent hints. Arthur was not entirely pleased. He could hardly contain himself. To avoid a huge scandal, Arthur just looked at men's things. "Hi," he said hello when he saw that she was finally free. "Hi," she answered in surprise. Alice looked at Arthur dumbfounded, blinking her painted lashes. They hadn't seen each other for over 2 months. Arthur's heart was racing. A silly smile hung on his handsome face. "You look good," he stretched out. "How did you get here?" "I missed you," Arthur replied hoarsely. For a couple of seconds, she glared at him incredulously. "Really? How's Elizabeth?" "Honestly, I don't know. We had a fight." "What a surprise. You had a fight with Elizabeth?" Alice's eyes expressed surprise and even incomprehension. "Imagine that," grinned Arthur. "How can I stay on friendly terms with the man who almost sent me to the next world?" He was silent, continuing to watch Alice's surprised face. Just a month later, she herself was in a hospital bed, outing with a girlfriend in a nightclub. She had too much alcohol. In the morning, she had shortness of breath, redness on the skin, heartbeat. She did not pay attention to it, decided that all by itself will pass. 2 days later, we had to call an ambulance. It turned out that allergy to some component of alcohol. They took me to the hospital, pumped me up. They said that even in time to address, all could have ended in death. Arthur sighed heavily and grinned wryly. As they say, don't dig a hole for someone else, you'll fall into it yourself. After her recovery, she told me everything sincerely. How she dreamed of divorcing us with you, how she built you intrigue. Arthur smiled crookedly, looking at Alice's beautiful face. How I missed her, that smile, confused look, dimple on her chin, he thought to himself. Thank God she's doing well. I hope that having received a boomerang, she will not bother me anymore and will finally leave me alone. And you too. Alice turned her head. Seeing a customer wandering around the store, she turned to Arthur. Sorry, I have to work. It was nice to see you. Alice waved him off and headed towards the man. Arthur didn't feel like leaving the store. There was some kind of ambiguity left after the meeting. He purposefully began to walk around the hall and choose things for himself. Good afternoon. Can I help you? The girl smiled at him with her sweet and charming smile. I would like to be served by Alice. Alice is busy, maybe? Girl, I'll wait for Alice. He interrupted her, continuing to scrutinize the shirts. Good. The girl came up to Alice and whispered something in her ear. Alice looked at Arthur, smiled, and shook her head. Arthur bought a sweater, shirt, tie, jeans, a new leather belt. Alice packed the purchases in a branded bag and gave it to Arthur. Thank you for shopping, Arthur. Come back again. Alice had a smile on her face, but she was cold and even aloof. Not a single muscle trembled on her face. Arthur also tried not to show his inner feelings, although he wanted to shout with all his might that he came here not for these fucking shirts, but to see her. He wanted to see her because he missed her. He was tired of being at home all alone. Arthur took his package from her hands. Thank you. Maybe we could meet tonight. Why? Arthur, do not start again. We're with you enough 1 month to realize it. As if by the way, answered his question Alice. I'm sorry, Alice. I feel bad without you. Arthur hesitated when he saw a courier with a beautiful basket of flowers entering the store. Arthur looked at him carefully. When he heard Alice's name, he couldn't help but burst into tears. You have an admirer? I don't know, it's probably a mistake. She shrugged her shoulders in surprise. Here are your flowers. The courier handed her a basket of flowers. Alice signed the receipt, read the card, and smiled guiltily. Yesterday, the man helped to pick up a suit for a wedding to a friend. Today, he decided to thank me. She barely audibly said, I see. Arthur swallowed loudly and choked. You're on. Are you out of your mind? Alice hissed quietly. She was seething inside. I can't believe he started a harem all by himself. He'd been walking around for 2 months, and I dare to accuse me of all the non-existent sins. But time to tell him everything she thinks. Alice did not have time. A new customer came in. She put a smile on her face, took the basket, looked disapprovingly at Arthur, wished him well, and left for the other end of the store. Alice could barely cope with her emotions. She looked sadly at the closed door behind Arthur. It was painful for her to remember that morning when she saw Arthur in the car with Elizabeth. And now that it had finally hit him, It hurt twice as much. If Arthur had truly loved her, he would not make her suffer. How could she have left him in such a terrible state? She would be the first to stand at the door of the infectious disease hospital, holding his hand, and no Elizabeth could stop her. She and Arthur could be the happiest couple in the city or even on the whole planet. But Arthur managed to undeservedly blame her, to pretend it was no big deal. Jess stood up in defense of Elizabeth and calmly let her go with her things on the way out. From such memories, Alice's eyes glistened. She barely restrained herself from crying. Alice woke up from the sharp call of the buyer. "Do you think this color looks good on me?" "Yeah." She tried to pull herself together. Smile, but it was not quite convincing. "It suits you." She finally pulled herself together. Alice's eyes widened when she saw the delivery man with the basket of flowers again. When she heard her name, her palms suddenly sweated. Alice took out a small card. When she read it, she rolled her eyes and smiled. Arthur apologized for his rude words and invited her on a romantic date. At the bottom he signed, "No refusal accepted." Alice looked at herself in the mirror. It would be nice to go home and change. She sighed heavily. "I wish I'd worn my new dress today." It was already past 8 o'clock, and Alice still hadn't gotten off work. After standing there for another 30 minutes, Arthur realized that she was just playing on his nerves. "It's like she's messing with me on purpose," he said aloud, nervously drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. He couldn't take it anymore, so he pulled out his cell phone and dialed her number. "Hello, Alice, I'm waiting for you." Trying not to show his irritation, said Arthur. "Arthur, sorry, I forgot to warn you. Today will not work out." "Why not?" "Because we are now accepting the goods." "And how long will it take?" "About an hour, maybe longer." "I'll wait," Arthur answered categorically. Alice didn't answer anything, just dropped the call. Arthur took another cigarette out of the pack, got out of the car, and smoked. After standing for another hour, he finally saw Alice. He quickly jumped out of the car and went towards her. She was staring at her phone, not paying attention to the others, and not seeing anything around her. Arthur took 2 steps towards her, and Alice stared right at him. Something interesting. Arthur took her by the shoulders and looked intently into her eyes. "I already thought, sinfully, that you do not want to see me, offended by me." "Maybe I was offended," she said tiredly. "That's what I thought. I sometimes have a mind separate from my body. Forgive me for my shameless tongue." I saw the basket with flowers, almost lost my mind from wild jealousy. "Let's go." Arthur took a deep breath, buried his nose in her hair. "Where to?" "We need to talk." Arthur smiled. Alice had been looking forward to this meeting. She was curious to find out why Arthur had become active again. For 2 months, he'd been silent. There hadn't been even the tiniest of attempts on her part. She never dreamed they'd meet again. "About what?" She tried to make her voice sound indifferent. "Come on, you'll find out." Arthur took her hand. He opened the passenger door, carefully fastened her seatbelt. They drove just 2 blocks. Arthur had trouble finding a parking space. Turned off the engine. They went into a cozy cafe. Arthur ordered. Once they were alone, he put his hand over hers. "I understand you're doing well. Working, lots of admirers." "Arthur, what admirers? What are you talking about?" "First time I've ever been given a bouquet. Thank you for the flowers, by the way." She took her hand away. "Alice, stop sulking. Come back," he said in a hoarse voice. "No, Arthur, I'm not coming back." "Why not? You have such a temper. Anything that's not your way, you don't think straight. You don't weigh up the pros and cons, you start waving your saber around." Alice gave him a sad look. "I'm ready to make amends, and you're going to help me do it," Arthur said with an air of importance. "I'm afraid I don't have the strength." Alice grinned bitterly. "But you try." "I already tried. Nothing worked." She lowered her eyes. It was hard and even almost impossible to withstand Arthur's gaze. "I'm not letting you go anywhere else. Stop testing my mettle," Arthur said. Alice waved her index finger at him, her cheeks reddened with irritation and righteous anger. "It turns out if I want to kick out, I want to call back." "No, Arthur, this will not happen. I will not come back to you and that's it." Arthur froze. He absolutely did not expect to hear such words from docile and once modest Alice. "Alice, we made a scandal out of nothing. Think about it. Because nothing terrible happened. I did not cheat on you and I'm not going to cheat in the future. Is it so difficult to forget all the offenses, forgive and enjoy life with a loved one? I'm just sure that we are made for each other. Arthur, no, I'm not changing my mind. I believed you once. And I think that only fools and dead people don't change their opinion. Everyone makes mistakes. It's a reason to reconsider your views and principles. Arthur decided to shine his wit. And I ask you to come to the store only for shopping. Snarky Alice. Then I will have to completely change my closet. He smiled. Arthur, take me home, please, suddenly asked Alice. Whatever you say, darling. Arthur paid the waiter, carefully took her under his elbow, and led her out. Where are you taking me? Flapping her eyelashes asked Alice. To my home. Without taking his eyes off the road, Arthur clarified. Stop this nonsense. I told you that I'm not coming back to you. She got mad. Let's watch a movie. I bought a new coffee maker. I'll make you coffee. Calmly continued Arthur. Stop the car. Arthur pulled the car over. He turned to Alice, ran his fingers along her cheekbones, moved his hand to her knee. Get your hands off me. She shoved his hand away. Take me home. Where am I taking you? We're going home. He continued to explain. How could I ever believe you again? I hate you. From hate to love, it's one step. After saying that, he covered her lips with his. From an excruciatingly caressing and intoxicating kiss, all rational thoughts instantly flew out of her head. Arthur, please, she whispered quietly, trying to regain her breath. Only after you show me how much you hate me, he said, covering her lips again with a passionate kiss. Alice couldn't help herself. A hot wave of desire spilled over her whole body. She began to breathe hard. God, how she wanted to return to the time when they were together. Giving in to a lightning impulse, Alice pressed herself even harder against Arthur. His kiss became even deeper and more desirable. Alice had not planned to allow any liberties and bodily contact, but being in his arms, as if bewitched, gave in to his caresses. As if mesmerized, Alice enjoyed and responded to his hot kisses. At this moment, she wanted to spit on his pride, close his eyes to his offenses, wave goodbye, to say yes. But despite the burning desire to stay with this dear man, Alice found the strength to tear herself away from Arthur, who took the opportunity to take her in his arms. Arthur, let go, please. I need to go home. Unnaturally quiet, almost a whisper, said Alice, trying to get out of his clinging hands. He ignored her attempts. Arthur reached for her again, trying to kiss her, but Alice, this time, deftly shoved him away and turned her face away. Arthur, please stop. Show some respect. She felt his muscles tense. A wry grin appeared on his face. No, honey, I'm not letting you go anywhere. So qualitatively and culturally take out the brain, and at the same time do not feel any remorse. May only you. Alice thought for a moment. He thinks he came, gave flowers. He's got his head up his ass, and I'm supposed to step into his shoes. Forget everything at once, forgive him. Pretend that nothing supernatural has happened. What do you mean I won't let go? I feel like we broke up a long time ago. I left and I'm not coming back. She brought him back to reality. I feel that you are far from indifferent, Arthur replied in a hoarse voice. It was a momentary weakness. No more, she instantly clarified. Alice, I was wrong. I realize I repent. I understand that very much offended you. I have already asked your forgiveness countless times. If you want, I can ask you many, many more times. It's not hard for me to do. Don't do anything. Just take me home. If you don't, I won't believe a word you say. Arthur pulled away, looked at Alice with a displeased look. He sighed heavily. At first, she thought he wouldn't let her go. He would forcefully bring her home and do what they both wanted. But Arthur gritted his teeth. He held back, started the engine, turned the corner and drove in silence. Thank you. Alice jumped out of the car like a scalded woman. I'll walk her out. Arthur muttered grudgingly. Having lost all hope of putting Alice to bed that night, Arthur followed her with a disgruntled look. If you think I'm going to stop there, you're sorely mistaken. I'll meet you again tomorrow. I'll follow you around until you agree to come back. Don't waste your precious time. Those words have ruined Arthur's already bad mood. I bet in a week, 2 weeks tops, You'll be making me coffee in the morning, frying eggs and bacon, and making hot sandwiches. He pressed Alice's back against the front door. He leaned in and kissed her again. I'll see you tomorrow. What about tomorrow? And tomorrow I meet you again. We have dinner, we go for a walk. I try to take you to my house again. That will be every day until you eventually agree. Arthur kissed her again on the lips. Alice closed her eyes, feeling with every cell of her body that here in his strong arms, she felt as if she had returned to her native and familiar father's house. Arthur was right after all. 2 weeks later, Alice packed her things and moved in with Arthur, having taken a promise from him never to accuse or make her feel guilty, to be respectful, trusting, and not jealous. Well, darling, congratulations. You're a student now. I wish you successful sessions, good grades, adequate teachers. Arthur, from the bottom of his heart, congratulated Alice on entering the university on a correspondence course. Today, we're going to celebrate your enrollment. Pick a restaurant. I am the sponsor, solemnly announced Arthur, gently kissing her on the cheek. I don't want to go anywhere. Alice wrinkled her face. What's with the mood? Olivia told me she was expecting a call. Arthur tried to cheer up his beloved. Let's order your favorite Italian cuisine. From his words, Alice covered her mouth with her hand and ran to the bathroom. Arthur made a surprised face and followed her, a little breathless, after a little pleasant procedure. After rinsing her mouth with water, Alice sank to the floor, right in the bathroom, put her head on her knees and closed her eyes. Is there anything you want to tell me? Arthur broke the silence. Justified to him for his condition, there was no desire and strength. Alice was still slightly nauseous and her mood was at zero. It was most likely something poisoned. Alice frantically began to remember what she had eaten for breakfast today. Did you feel all right yesterday? Arthur asked cautiously. He held out his hand and helped her up from the cold tile. It was probably just something I ate. Don't we have any tests in the medicine cabinet? Arthur asked, even though he knew the obvious answer. Why not? Alice wrinkled her face and shook her head. Maybe you. Arthur didn't say the word pregnant out loud. Stop it. It's not funny. Alice walked out of the bathroom. She didn't feel like talking to Arthur at all. So what should I do? Make a reservation at the restaurant. If you're not feeling well, can we reschedule for tomorrow? I don't want anything. Alice closed her eyes. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. Whatever you say, dear. I'll be there soon. I have to go out. Arthur warned her. He quickly got ready and left the apartment. He walked briskly to the pharmacy. He bought several different tests at once, thanked the pharmacist for the consultation, and returned home. Alice, take a test just in case. What the hell is not kidding? Maybe you're pregnant. Arthur put several different boxes in front of her. And if the result is confirmed, she looked at Arthur questioningly. Let's find out the result first. I'm warning you, I won't have an abortion. If anything, I will raise my child myself. Arthur grinned. She'll raise it herself. She's grown up and independent. He sank into the chair. Alice got up, took the test and closed herself in the bathroom. Arthur stared at one point. He had no energy to wait for Alice. His whole life had flashed before his eyes in those few minutes. How had I lived before? For what, for whom? Always running, always striving for something, trying to prove to people that I was still capable of something. A restaurant, whores, girlfriends like Elizabeth, and everything suited me, until Aliska came into my life. Arthur turned his gaze to Alice's pale face. There was silence in the room. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. I'm pregnant. Alice barely squeezed out of herself and handed Arthur the test, which showed 2 clear stripes. You mean I'm going to be a father soon? Aren't you excited? It seemed like one more second and she would explode like an atomic bomb. Alice watched his reaction carefully, trying to understand his mood, but she couldn't read anything on Arthur's face. Arthur, I repeat, I will not have an abortion. Say something. Aren't you happy? I can't imagine myself as a parent, but I'm glad. I really am. I am. You are. Of course you are. Arthur hugged Alice and kissed the top of her head. Thank you. I love you. I wanted to surprise you tonight, but I can't wait till tonight. Arthur picked up his purse, the same one that got him punched in the head by Thomas. He opened the lock, took out a red velvet box. He opened it and handed it to Alice. "What's this?" "A ring." "Arthur, did I get that right?" "That's right. Marry me." Alice bit her lip, barely holding back tears. "Arthur, you're proposing to me?" "I don't believe it." She threw herself around his neck. "All I have to do is get down on one knee. Do you want to?" "I do. I really do." Arthur took her hands away and got down on one knee. "Alice, marry me," he said in a serious tone. "I will." Arthur put a ring on her finger. When at the ultrasound, the doctor announced the sex of the baby and said that they will have a son. Arthur was glowing with happiness. "A son." Dreamily, he said, gently stroking Alice's tummy. Now Myron is already 3 years old. According to Arthur, the son inherited the intelligence and beauty of his father, but stubborn character of his precious mother. When Arthur first took Myron in his arms, he took a long, hard look at him. A happy smile never left his face. Arthur could not believe that finally at 32 years old, became a father of such a wonderful son. Then he went to Alice, kissed her. "Thank you, my love, for your son. He is so beautiful." And Alice almost burst into tears with happiness. To meet Alice from the maternity hospital came her sister with her husband and 2 nephews. The sister was so happy and joyful. She was constantly wiping away her tears. She praised Alice and couldn't get enough of Myron. She smiled at Arthur and was always thankful for her sister. Elizabeth sent a message. She congratulated Alice on the birth of her son. She asked her to forgive her again. She said she wanted to come to the discharge, but she was afraid Alice would lose her milk if she saw her, and she couldn't let that happen.
Jenny and Selena were complete opposites, probably why they were drawn to each other for years. Playing in the same sandbox continued with Selena's tantrum when it was revealed that they would be going to different groups in kindergarten. In this regard, after a short persuasion of the kindergarten staff and some of the parents, the girlfriends were assigned to the same group. There was no talk of different schools, and although Selena did not have enough knowledge and abilities, but the lessons with a tutor, father's connections, and Jenny's assurances to help her friend in her studies determined her in the gymnasium with advanced study of foreign languages. Selena immediately became the soul and the leader of the class, and very soon acquired a lot of new friends and acquaintances, while Jenny modestly chewed a grand of science for herself and her friend. But Selena had to give credit. Despite all her popularity and universal adoration, and love friend was in first place. If Jenny couldn't go to another party or camping trip, Selena would also refuse the event. Taking advantage of their such a strong friendship, many people tried to influence the girls through each other. Through Selena, they asked Jenny to help them with their studies, and through Jenny, they asked Jenny to take them to some private, members-only party. "You and I, Jenny, we will make mountains together," laughed Selena, hugging her friend. Of course, Selena was the first to date boys, and it was not surprising. Bright appearance, light cheerful character, and clothes on the latest peak youth fashion attracted the opposite sex as a magnet. Young people were over the moon with happiness when the girl agreed to go with them to the movies, cafes, or just dance at the school festival. They were not even opposed to communicating with Jenny, just to be closer to the object of adoration. And only Selena was the only one who saw the true beauty of her friend, not inferior to her own. "Jenny, well, let's do your hair, makeup, dress you not so boring," she persuaded her friend. "I swear, you'll outshine everyone." "Even you?" Jenny smiled softly. "Well, I'm not likely," laughed Selena, "but I assure you, you'll be no less spectacular." "Thank you, Selena, but I'm fine with everything about me," she said to her friend. Selena laughed merrily and waved her hand. Such conversations always ended the same way, but she didn't give up hope that her best friend would someday change her boring dress for a more feminine and revealing one. She would let her gorgeous blonde hair down and emphasize her huge green eyes and sensual lips with makeup. After graduating from high school, Jenny easily entered the university, but Selena, despite all the efforts and help of her friend, failed the entrance exams. But the girl was not discouraged, knew that her father will not let them separate from her favorite friend, who, in addition, restrained her impulses to binge life. So it turned out parents determined the daughter on the paid department. In the institute, Selena immediately became the soul of any company and a welcome guest at any party. Jenny, on the contrary, more and more immersed in her studies, distancing herself from student life. Now even to parties Salima invited her only because she had to invite her, realizing that her friend would not go anyway. However, at Ginny's request, she could refuse any event and be with her friend alone, go to the movies or cafes. Ginny was grateful for this Salina and tried not to abuse her friendship, realizing that her friend was absolutely polar to her. But sometimes Ginny also went out to noisy parties, giving in to her friend's requests. She even bought, with Salina's help, appropriate outfits for such occasions. To her surprise, young people paid attention to her, but after a couple of phrases with them, Ginny got bored and became indifferent to them, which of course repulsed guys. The girl did not understand how you could be interested in life-only clubs, cars, and easy money. Just before her birthday, Selena once again fell in love. You just can't imagine how cool he is. Rolling her eyes, she told her friend. Handsome, athletic, smart, caring, gentle, with a sense of humor. Caring? This is something new. Smiled, listening to the enthusiastic flow of her friend Ginny. Usually, you limited yourself to handsome, athletic, and sometimes funny. He's amazing. Selena continued with a gasp, covering her eyes. And in bed. Oh, spare me the details. Ginny covered her friend's mouth with her palm. You just don't understand. Selena urged Ginny fervently, taking her palm away and opening her eyes wide. With a man like that, you don't realize how you end up in his bed. Selena, I really hope that someday I will experience the same sensations as you. But for now, don't make me blush with the details. Selena smiled and hugged her best friend tightly. I'll introduce you to him at the birthday party. Maybe you'll change your mind about men, but I'm warning you, Buck is mine. I'm not going to take your treasure, laughed Ginny. Ginny, meet my Buck. Selena grabbed Ginny's hand from the doorway and dragged her to meet him. Ginny, a little embarrassed by the guests present, among whom she didn't even know half, followed her friend. It's a pleasure, Buck. The young man looked at Ginny, smiling softly. That look made the girl's body feel warm and faint. She wanted to stand there and stare at him forever. At that time, someone pushed her and Ginny woke up. Ginny. Ginny, she whispered and reached out her hand, regretting it a moment later. His touch literally gave her an electric shock. Selima has told me so much about you that I couldn't wait to meet you. He looked at the girl holding his hand with such tenderness that Ginny realized that she should leave the party right now, because that look, directed at her friend, hurt so much. All right, greetings exchange. Let's go. Selena picked up her friend with her other hand and led them to a large table in the center of the room, laden with various drinks and snacks. A birthday party couldn't go by without the birthday girl. Their approach was met with loud, enthusiastic shouts. From all sides, hands were reaching out to Selena to hug her, kiss her, clink glasses, and just touch her. The girl liked to be the center of attention, and she did not hide it. Drink? Came a voice above her ear that Ginny would now recognize out of 1,000. Do you mind if we go straight to you? No, trying to appear nonchalant, Ginny took the glass held out to her and drank it in a gulp, feeling her throat burn. What is this? Champagne, Buck replied perplexed and took the glass from her hand, sniffed it, then shook the remaining drops onto his tongue. His movement made Ginny's cheeks flush and dizzy. Strange, ordinary champagne, without noticing her condition, said the amazed young man. Buck, you what? You gave Ginny alcohol. Selena, who had freed herself from the congratulators, jumped up to them. Just champagne. The boy stared questioningly at his girlfriend. I told you Ginny never drank anything stronger than orange juice. Selena frowned, but it was obvious she was doing it for looks. Oh, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot about that. Buck looked guiltily at Ginny. Are you okay? I think so, a confused Ginny mumbled. Snack now. Selena ordered her and shoved a canapé into her hands. Buck. She turned to the young man still standing there with a guilty look on his face. Get some juice, or better yet, water. Buck headed for the table. Well, no sooner had you gotten here than I missed you. Selena looked at her friend worriedly. It's okay, Selena, really, Ginny tried to reassure her. I'm not much of a drinker. It'll wear off. Buck gave Ginny a glass of water and a plate of sandwiches. Thank you. The girl made sure her hand didn't accidentally touch his. Their mutual friends ran up to them and pulled them to dance. I'd rather sit for a while, Ginny asked Selena. Okay, she agreed. If you need anything, tell me right away. Selena and Buck left to dance, and Jenny found an empty seat by the wall and with water and sandwiches went to it. Why hadn't she called in sick? She would have congratulated Selena tomorrow. She was already considered a white sheep in the student circle, and then there's this embarrassment with alcohol. What would Buck think of her? Well, who cares? Her friend doesn't like to stay with the same guy for long. Maybe soon there'll be another guy to take Buck's place, and he won't even think about her, Jenny. Your friend is. She's so weird. What do you mean? Selena squinted, slowing down their slow dance. It's like she's from another world, or a century. So, unaccustomed. And very beautiful. I would say. Airy. Buck looked tenderly at Selena. I'd agree about unfit, and beautiful too. But from another world or century, Jenny is a very intelligent and pragmatic girl. It's just that no one has been willing to get to know her better until now. Although, maybe it's for the best. She'll wait for the one and only. There's a lot of hustlers out there who don't want anything but easy money. I'm not talking about you, Buck. You're different. Thank you. The young man kissed Selena tenderly. The girl clung to him. He really wasn't like that. Buck was the first man she'd ever been attracted to. With his gallantry, care, tenderness, and responsibility, he made her feel like she was behind a wall of stone. The champagne, the loud music, and the shock of meeting Buck, and most likely the latter, had given Jenny a headache. She sat in a chair against the wall for most of the evening, occasionally checked on by Selena and Buck, who brought her water. The party was in full swing when Jenny realized she couldn't stay here any longer. She sought out her friend and informed her of her intention to leave. Are you all right? Selena asked worriedly. I'm fine. Just a headache. Jenny tried to keep her smile genuine. You know how I feel about parties, right? I'm going to go home. Take a pill and go to bed. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Selena and Buck walked her to the cab. Please call me when you get there. Selena asked. I'll be worried. I will. Jenny kissed her friend on the cheek and extended her hand to Buck. It was nice to meet you. Likewise, his smile made Jenny dizzy and her legs shake again. At home, she popped a pill, called Selena, letting her know she was fine, changed, showered, and got into bed. It was time to take a good hard look at and evaluate everything that had happened to her today. But as soon as she thought of Buck, all her pragmatic thinking shut down and she burst into tears, tucked into her pillow. Buck was not a student at the university where her friend studied. He was a graduate of a technical university and was already working at one of the city's enterprises. A promising engineer, in good standing with the management, was an enviable groom in the circle of his peers. However, when at one of the parties of his colleague appeared Selena, Buck almost immediately fell in love with her. Cheerful, sociable, even one could say reckless beauty, immediately attracted the attention of all the male half of the party. Not paying attention to her companion, with whom she came, she flirted with everyone, causing admiration of men and hatred of women gathered at the party. Buck watched her from a distance, rightly reasoning that he had no chance to resist the crowd of her many admirers. But to his amazement, Selena approached him. Can I have a little breathing room with the man who's the only one who doesn't undress me with his eyes? She asked it so simply, without a trace of coquetry, that Buck immediately wanted to do to her exactly what she had just said. They chatted the rest of the party. Selena was skillfully blowing off the other men trying to get the attention of other men. Her date, who she had come to the party with, was standing nearby drinking glass after glass, glancing angrily at Buck. Your boyfriend doesn't seem to like that you've forgotten about him. Buck nodded toward the suitor. Selena waved her hand as if warding off a fly. I met him at the movies the other day. I thought he was a decent young man, but he immediately started making ambiguous hints. I made it clear I wasn't going out with a boring guy, so he invited me to this party. When Buck and Selena were about to leave, the boring guy tried to correct the situation and claimed Selena, but the girl only squeamishly wrinkled her nose and advised to pump up your brains before hitting on normal girls. Then, while the fan was digesting what she had heard, she grabbed Buck by the arm and dragged him away from the party. The passion that immediately erupted helped them to be in the same bed on the second date. This further piqued Buck's interest, and he forgot about everything but this girl. She was beautiful, enchanting, unpredictable. He looked forward to meeting her, and after each meeting, he realized more and more that he had found the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Meeting her best friend, Jenny, convinced Buck of the right choice. They were too different, as if from different universes, times, and compositions. However, Selena loved her friend, and it was visible to the naked eye. She treasured and cared for her. She listened to her opinions and was always willing to drop everything for Jenny, even canceling a date with him. Buck didn't take offense to that. Jenny gave him mixed feelings of admiration, interest, and tenderness, like a child. He gladly came to her aid if it was required, exactly male participation, to carry heavy bags, to help with the choice of a new gadget, to discard the obsessive suitor. Although with the latter at Jenny, unlike Selena, there were no problems, as well as suitors. There were almost no. Quiet, modest Jenny gave the impression of easy gain, and her eternal desire to learn attracted lazy students, thinking that for a couple of compliments girl will finish university for them. But Jenny didn't pay attention to them or just blew them off. The most persistent ones had to deal with Selena. Sometimes Selena would latch out at her friend. "Jenny, you're gonna be a blue stocking soon enough. Why don't Buck set you up with a decent guy to diversify your abstruse life? Let's go out. Let's go out and have some fun." But Jenny always said no. Selena wondered, what's wrong with her? She's completely out of her mind with her studies. "So you have a diploma on the nose," smiled Buck, "and she has 2 of them to write. What are you implying?" Selena was jokingly angry. "Well, you haven't even started." "Yeah, that's right, that's right," the girl confessed. "Term papers, essays, diplomas, and all the rest is not my thing." "All right, let's leave Jeannie alone. You hear me, Jeannie? But only until you get your diploma, and then you're not getting away from me." Jenny smiled and nodded in agreement. During the exams and the defense of diplomas, Buck almost did not see Selena. The girl, under the guidance of her best friend, still seriously took up her studies. He missed her very much, and when it became quite unbearable, he called and asked for a meeting. Selena agreed, and he rushed to his beloved's house to take her into his arms and kiss her for a while. The girl, too, was glad to see him. Her eyes looked at him with such greed that he wanted to shout, "Leave your studies to your mother. I can provide for you for the rest of your life. You won't have to work." But he realized that Selena would never agree to that. For all her easygoing, fun-loving, and reckless nature, she didn't want to be dependent on anyone. She didn't want to be a dependent. Buck had to wait, and now the long-awaited day had come. Today was the girls' graduation defense, followed by a little party. Buck was already in the morning, rushing around the apartment. He wasn't going to stay long at the party. He had other plans for this evening and night. 2 hours before the appointed time, he ran out of the house and headed for the nearest jewelry store. The decision had been made. He would ask Selena to be his wife. Jenny had just about gotten used to the idea that the man who had touched her heart was dating her friend. She was happy at the thought that he was, after all, with her own person. And every now and then she could see him and nurture a small sliver of hope that one day he would get bored with her best friend and, in love with her, would be forced to seek Jenny's support. That day, the day of her graduation defense, she had asked Selena to help her choose an outfit for the first time. Surprised and excited, her friend rushed to help, forgetting about herself. After trying on a lot of outfits, Selena gave Jenny one of her dresses with the words, "This is the most modest of my holiday outfits, but for you, I'm sure it's just right." The dress was indeed gorgeous. It emphasized Jenny's figure and set off her eyes. The shiny, open shoes emphasized her, as it turned out, infinitely long legs. Selena insisted that Jenny's hair was loose and curled into careless locks, supported by a single dainty barrette with emerald stones. "You look like a nymph, like a queen," said Selena admiringly to her friend. To her surprise, Jenny realized that it wasn't just her friend who was attracting attention, but herself as well. The young men were genuinely courting her and saw her as a girl, not just an object that could be useful to them. Every now and then, she would catch a slightly surprised smiling look from Buck, and that was enough to make her happy. Surprised at her looseness, she accepted compliments from the young men, flirted with them, and even agreed to dance a few times. However, from persistent offers to escort her, flatly refused. In the middle of the party, suddenly the music turned off. The young people murmured unhappily, demanding a continuation. "May I have your attention, please?" Buck's voice came from the stage. "I apologize for interrupting your party, but I ask you to take it with understanding. I'm very excited now, as I want to do this for the first time in my life, and I ask for your support." The hum died down, and there was an intrigued silence in the hall, broken by whispers. "Selena," Buck continued, "please come to me." The surprised girl stepped up onto the restaurant's ministich. Anticipating that she would not like Buck's words, Jenny sat down on the nearest chair and took the champagne glass in her hand. Meanwhile, Buck pulled a small box from his pocket and got down on one knee in front of Selena. "Selena, you are the most beautiful girl in my life. When I met you, I realized that you were the one I had been waiting for all my life. I've waited and waited, and now I want you to be with me always. Will you marry me?" Someone in the audience gasped in delight. Someone giggled. Jenny drank her glass and took a second one. Selena had tears in her eyes. It was obvious that she couldn't say a word out of emotion. Desperate to utter a word, she nodded and held out her hand with her thumb out. To rapturous shouts and applause, Buck put the ring on her and jumped up to embrace her, followed by a kiss. Jenny drank another glass and reached for a second. She didn't notice two of her classmates approaching the table where she was sitting. "Jenny, are you happy for your friend?" Of course. The girl tried to put on an enthusiastic smile. To the future newlyweds, one of the girls shouted into the hall and raised her glass. She was supported by shouts and clinking of glasses. Jenny also joined in the shouting and then emptied her glass in a volley. The music started up again and everyone rushed to dance. Jenny was pulled into the circle where she, who had never danced in her life, danced as well as a disco girl. She hadn't noticed how much time had passed when Selena and Buck came up to her. "Oh, guys, hi." Jenny smiled broadly. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you." "Jenny, are you drunk?" Selena took her friend by the shoulder and looked concernedly into her eyes. "I think so." Jenny didn't deny it. "Have you lost your mind? Have you forgotten how bad you felt last time?" "No, but Selena, everyone's having fun, partying, drinking champagne. I'm just gonna walk around with a glass of water. You have to start sometime." "But not in such quantities," Selena said sternly. "Selena, you're not my mother." "I agree. I'm your friend and I don't want you to do anything stupid and get hurt. But since you take my concern in such a way, then by all means, keep it up. I won't say a word to you. Buck, let's go. The girl's grown up and she doesn't need our care anymore." An angry Selena turned on her heels and walked away from Jenny. Buck threw a concerned look at Jenny and rushed after his fiancée. "What am I doing?" ran through the girl's mind. "What am I trying to prove? Is it Selena, my best friend, who we've been together since we were babies, fault that her boyfriend, her future husband, fell in love with her and not me? Is it Buck's fault that I fell for him at first sight? They've always been so good to me, caring for me, shielding me from trouble, wishing me well. And me? I acted like a pig, and I got drunk. Selena, Selena." "Wait," shouted Jenny and ran after her friend. Selena heard her yell, stopped and turned around. "Selena, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm saying. You're right, and I'm an ungrateful pig." "What are you talking about, Jenny?" Selena walked over to her friend and hugged her. "You're wonderful. You've just had a little too much to drink and got overexcited. You've been stressed out all year with all those final exams and diplomas. No wonder your nerves are shot. I was the one having all the fun. You were the one studying for both of us. And it's my fault that I left you today, busy with my personal life. So you relax as you did. I'm so sorry." "Oh, Selena." Jenny was ready to cry. There were tears glistening in Selena's eyes too. "Okay, girls, I think we should get out of here and go somewhere quieter where we can socialize, have a drink, and teach Jenny how to celebrate properly. How about it?" "Let's go." The friends nodded happily. Jenny reluctantly threw on her coat, picked up her bag and gift box, and walked out of the house. She had stopped liking this holiday 3 years ago. She wanted to lock herself away, crawl under the covers and stay there for at least 3 days, but she had to buy presents, pick out an outfit, and go to her best friend and her husband's house to celebrate New Year's Eve. At first, Jenny tried to refuse, citing that New Year's Eve was a family holiday and she didn't want to disturb her friend's quiet family happiness. But Selena was adamant. "What are you? You're not family. You and I have been together since we were in diapers. Better than siblings. Our parents have their own companies and interests. You'll be bored with them. So no interfering. You're a member of our family and you have to celebrate the new year with us." Indeed, Jenny supported his wife Buck. "Well, you can't celebrate with your coworkers. Maybe they'll bore you, or, on the contrary, will be too intrusive, or you'll get tired. And here you have us. And at any time you can go to rest in the room that we have allocated for you. What about your colleagues? They've booked a beautiful restaurant with a festive program, and if I get bored, I can easily call a cab and go home. A cab? On New Year's Eve? Selena laughed. I assure you, it will be unreal. Anyway, we have and that's it. And for the third year in a row, Jenny endured the agony of attending the New Year's Eve party with her best friend and her husband, with whom Jenny was secretly in love, and to her annoyance, this feeling did not want to leave her. Immediately after the institute, Jenny got a job in an international travel agency, where a year later she became the head of the department. And it was not surprising. Her red diploma was confirmed by her excellent knowledge of languages and cultures of different countries. Colleagues, initially skeptical of her educational credentials, over time began to respect her, and her superiors appreciated. Selena got a job in the firm where Buck worked, translator. But from what she told me, she did little translating. She mostly flirted with male colleagues and seduced her husband. Buck, on the other hand, loved his wife and indulged her in everything. Citing her busy schedule, Jenny tried to see her friends as little as possible. It was too painful to see the man she loved feeling the same way she did, but for another woman. But it hurt even more to see Buck genuinely consider her a friend. But no matter how hard Jenny tried to avoid seeing her friends, 3 times a year she had to be in their company, on New Year's Eve and on the couple's birthdays. Happy New Year, Selena chirped, taking the box of presents from Jenny's hands. Buck was helping her take off her coat. Come on in. You look beautiful. Thank you. You look great too. So we've exchanged compliments. Now come on, I'll introduce you to the guests. Selena dragged her friend into the large living room where several people were already there. You didn't tell me you were having guests, Jenny whispered anxiously to her friend. We decided that we had already spent enough time together, and in order not to bore each other, we decided to diversify our society with other people. And you must be tired of spending the holiday with just me and Buck, Selena whispered back and smiled broadly at the 2 men they were approaching at the same time. Jenny, let me introduce you to my and Buck's co-workers John and Jacob. Men, please love and welcome my best friend Jenny. A pleasure. Each of the men gallantly kissed Jenny's hand. Selena then introduced her friend to the married couple Steve and Julian. They vacationed in Italy together, she whispered to Jenny and her work friend Diane. Finished with the greetings, Selena looked at Buck. He understood her look and spoke loudly. Well, now that we're all here, why don't we go to the table? The attendees responded in agreement and reached for the lavishly set table standing here in the living room. Jenny's seat was between John and Jacob. Behind Jacob sat Selena, followed by Buck, Julian, Steve, and Diane. Jenny thought for a moment that Diana was not happy with this seating arrangement, but she immediately put it out of her mind and concentrated on her behavior. John was an excellent conversationalist and an attentive gentleman. He tried to pay attention to both Jenny and Diana. Buck was discussing something with the couple, but Selena and Jacob. Jenny didn't notice it right away, but she thought her friend was leaning too close to him. Jacob's gaze didn't match that of her friend and co-worker either. It was as if he were caressing and undressing Selena with that gaze, and she was responding promisingly with her eyes. Jenny shook her head. No way. Her friend is not like that. Yes, she is a windy, reckless flirt, but she loves her husband and is faithful to him. After a moment, Jenny thought she was imagining it and joined in the conversation with John and Diana. She looked angry and desperate. What's wrong with you tonight? Jenny said to herself. You've been seeing things all night. She looked down at her glass. No, it wasn't empty. She had only sipped a small amount the entire time she had been at the table. Her musings were interrupted by Buck's loud voice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in a couple of minutes the chimes will strike. Please ask the men here to fill our ladies' glasses. The table became animated. We heard the popping of champagne and the clinking of glasses. With the last chime, everyone clinked glasses, drained their glasses, and began to congratulate each other. Jenny saw Buck and Selena kissing. The spouses, Steve and Julianne, also hugged. Diane received kisses on the cheeks from all the men present. Then it was Jenny's turn. Happy New Year. She was hugged in turn by John, Jacob, and Steve. Happy New Year. Buck touched her lips lightly with his own and then pulled away, startled by what he'd done. Jenny smiled, as if she didn't see anything wrong with it, and turned away from Diana to kiss him quickly on the lips as well. Her cheeks were burning, but only she and Buck knew why. After mutual congratulations and some more time-consuming hors d'oeuvres, the guests began to gradually get up from the table to stretch. Buck went to turn on the music, and Diana suggested that Jeannie go powder her nose. But instead of taking a bath, she pulled her out onto the large loggia. She opened the window and took out a pack of cigarettes and handed them to Jeannie, who shook her head in denial. Shrugging her shoulders, Diana lit a cigarette. "How was the holiday?" "Not used to it," Jeannie answered honestly. "Why?" "Usually it's just the three of us." Jeannie looked at her companion, who was looking at her with interest. "No, don't think so. It's just that Selena and I, though very different, have been friends since we were very young. She and I are practically like twins." Diana shook her head. "Well, yes. It's just that I'm busy with work now. Selena's a married woman, and we don't see each other much. Only on holidays like this." Diana was about to say something else, but John came into the loggia. "Girls, shall I join you?" "Yes, of course," Jeannie answered for both of them, especially since I was already cold, but I didn't want to leave Diana alone. "You're just in time." Jeannie left the loggia and returned to the living room. Buck was having a passionate discussion with the couple. Selena and Jacob were nowhere to be seen. Jeannie decided that her friend had gone to her bedroom for something, so she went there, where she could hear the sounds of breathing and kissing in the semi-darkness of the room. In the embracing lovers, Jeannie recognized her friend and Jacob. "Selena, are you out of your mind?" Jeannie sat across from her friend in the cafe and forgot about the melting ice cream as she was overcome with conflicting feelings. "I saw everything." "What did you see?" Selena asked calmly. "You and Jacob. How could you?" It had been 2 months since that unfortunate New Year's Eve when Jeannie had caught her friend cheating on her. "Jeannie, don't get me wrong. Buck is a wonderful man. He's a wonderful husband. I really love him and I want to be with him. But in the last year, he's been so boring. We used to go out, have fun. Now he insists on having a normal family. He wants me to give birth to him, to behave like a normal wife, cook borscht, create coziness, give birth to children. What happened to him? I don't understand. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for children. I'll have a couple of beautiful babies someday, but not now. And he wants them now. But that's why you started a family. I married him so I could be with him, so that I could have him, so that we could always be together. Do you love him? Of course I love him. It's just, now is not the time to be tied down by domesticity." Selena looked at her friend pleadingly. "Are you judging me? I think you should just talk to Buck about it, not go behind his back." "You think I didn't?" "That's not what he thinks. He says it's time you stopped living for yourself and started thinking about the future. I don't want to. I'd be bored with that kind of life." "But cheating. You have no idea how obsessed Buck is with his normal family life. He's always talking about it, slipping me women's magazines with smiling housewives and kids. And Jacob," Selena smiled dreamily, "he makes my life interesting." "Selena, I still don't get it. That's just the way I am." Selena shook her head and looked at her friend pleadingly. "You know, I can't sit still. I need drive, movement, noisy company, and thrills." For the first time in her life, Jeannie felt disgusted. If she had understood her friend before, and even envied her carelessness and detachment a little, now she no longer understood her. She suddenly realized with horror what different people they were, how they had different priorities and different ideas about life. She also felt very bad for Buck. According to Selena, he was every girl's dream, but she didn't appreciate it. Jeannie said goodbye to her friend, who still didn't understand why she was in a bad mood. Shrugging her shoulders, she looked around the cafe. At the bar was a solid man looking at her with interest. Selena smiled lightly at him and immediately received a raised glass in greeting from the man. An affair was brewing. "Jeannie, hi. It's Buck. Did you recognize him?" Of course she did. She could recognize his voice out of a million. Jeannie pulled herself together and tried to speak casually. "Hi, Buck. Of course I recognize you, especially since I have your number on my cell phone. Can we get together and talk?" The girl's heart sank. What did you want to talk to her about? Did he find out about Selena's cheating? And if he did, he thinks she, Jeannie, knows about it too. He'll forgive Selena. He loves her. But with Jeannie, he'll probably break off all relations. He won't tolerate betrayal. What could she do, though? Not drag her friend away from another suitor? What if he thought they were flirting? That Jeannie lured Selena into cheating on her husband. Sorry, Buck. I have a lot of work to do. Ginny couldn't look him in the eye. Oh, Jeannie, please. This is very important to me. I'll meet you anytime and anywhere you want. It didn't look like Buck wanted to fight with her. We have to take a chance and find out what was wrong with him that he needed her help. All right, come to my office. There's a nice cafe downstairs, so wait for me there and I'll be right down. Thanks, Jeannie. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I'm here. That means he was in the neighborhood. Ginny was nervous again, but there was nothing to do. She put on her jacket and walked out of the office. I ordered you a coffee. If there's anything else you want, just say the word. Buck looked disheveled. No, thanks. What's the matter? Ginny, I don't know how to say this, but Selena. Buck took Ginny's hands in his, making the girl dizzy and struggling to understand everything he was saying to her. But there was no strength to remove her hands. You know, when I met her, she was so bright, so funny, so mesmerizing. She had this irrepressible energy that was like a magnet. I fell in love with her. But now, I thought she'd get over all this and we have a quiet family life and have babies. But you see, Ginny, Selena hasn't changed. She still wants to party till the wee hours of the morning, have fun and be loud. And I've grown out of all that, and I don't know how to convince her that it's time to stop. I mean, we're not getting any younger. Buck, it's too early to talk about getting old, Ginny said softly. Selena's always been like this, and she's not going to change anytime soon. That's why I wanted to meet you. You two are close friends. She should listen to you. Buck, you're wrong. We're close friends, but we've always respected each other's privacy and stayed out of each other's hobbies. I'm not asking you to change her mind. Just talk to her. See what her plans are for the future. Maybe you can change her mind about married life somehow, just a little bit. All right, Buck. I'll try to talk to her and try to help your marriage, but I can't promise any results. Ginny stood up. She couldn't stand the touch of his hands any longer. Her mind was no longer listening to her. Buck jumped up behind her and grabbed her hands again. Thank you, Ginny. He gave her a quick peck on the cheek. The girl carefully released her hands. Bye, Buck. After meeting Buck, Ginny wasn't herself. Her work was falling out of her hands, and her mind was racing with conflicting thoughts. How could she convince Selena that her cheating would ruin her life? Or maybe screw her? Selena couldn't be fixed, and for Ginny, this was a chance to get closer to Buck. And when he finds out about his wife's cheating, he'll have her, Ginny, by his side. And maybe her support will make him look at her differently. Not as a friend, but as a woman. Calm, loving, domestic, ready for married life. What are you talking about? Ginny pulled herself back. You're judging Selena, and you're ready to steal her husband. Well, not steal, but take advantage of the situation. What kind of friend are you? Having decided to meet Selena today, Ginny reached for the phone to call her friend, but the ringing of the landline interrupted her. Ginny, come in. The supervisor was as brief and, as usual, rude. No wonder. Before organizing his travel agency, Michael went through all the hardships of military service, visited several hot spots, and having served as a lieutenant colonel, retired. He could not enjoy doing nothing for long and decided to open his own travel agency, which, thanks to his leadership and connections, quickly grew and became one of the most popular in the country. All the employees of the travel agency, following the example of the head, tried to be punctual and concise. Okay, Ginny, I think you know that our business in Indonesia is not as good as we would like it to be. Ginny nodded quickly. It's a sought-after destination, and we've been sending tourists there for a long time, but there are still some problems. I think it's because of the remote control, Michael, Ginny suggested. You see, the chief raised his index finger. That's why I've decided we should open an office there, a branch office. Well, that's a good idea. You're putting me in charge of that. Yes. Good. I'll send a team of specialists. I'll have them find staff, office space, set up communications. No. I'm afraid we can't make a difference with local staff. They need a manager from us. Permanently, not temporarily. Well, I think some of the staff will agree to move to Bali, for example. Ginny, I met you. The chief looked at the girl affectionately. Me? But why? You are a very good specialist. You have an excellent knowledge of languages. And as a manager, you have proven yourself. And on top of that, you don't have a family. After all, sending a whole family to live in another country is problematic. But you're perfect. But Michael, Jenny didn't feel good about having things decided for her. So what if she's not married? She has parents after all. Friends, acquaintances. Why should she give up everything for the company? Jenny, wait, don't jump to conclusions. Michael raised his hand soothingly. I'll give you a month to think about it. Think about it, weigh everything and agree. In turn, I promise you a significant increase in salary, a small chalet on the ocean at the expense of the company and your own car. The management of the branch will be entirely at your discretion. The only thing I will expect from you is to eliminate problems and increase profits. Michael smiled paternally. I need to think and consult with my family. I'm not completely alone after all. Of course, Jeannie. You've got a whole month. And I'm not promising anything. I'm not even sure I'll do it. A month, Jenny. What a day. Jenny sat in her office, staring blankly out the window. First Buck with an ambiguous request for me. Then Michael. Why? Should I drop everything and run away to Indonesia? Let them work it out without me. I'll just keep myself busy so I don't have to think. But the thought that she might never see Buck again tore her heart into many pieces and made her want to howl. Okay, I'm going to put Indonesia on hold for a couple days and get on with my current problems, Jenny decided. I have to talk to Selena, if only to convince myself that I can't do anything to help Buck. We'll talk to her about my possible departure. With that conclusion in mind, Jenny picked up the phone and dialed her parents' number. She needed to calm down and hear an independent and appropriate opinion. Having left work early, Michael, hoping for her consent, seemed ready to fulfill her every wish. In a couple of hours, Jenny was already at her parents' house. Well, why, daughter? Father sipped his legitimate after-dinner glass and looked good-naturedly at his daughter. I think it's not a bad rise in career. And it's not even about the material benefits. You have complete freedom of action, and that's worth a lot. You will be your own boss, and you will only report directly to the management, and even then, as I understand it, if you worsen the indicators, and I'm sure you'll only improve them. Dad, but it's so far away, and for a long time, we won't see each other at all. We don't see each other much anyway, and we'll be visiting you on vacation, and we'll be able to video chat. I assure you, we'll see each other a lot more often than if we lived in the same city. Jenny sighed. Maybe her father was right. But what about Selena and Buck? The girl stayed the night at her parents' house. Before she went to bed, Jenny's mom came into the room. Jenny, I know there's something else eating at you. She stroked her daughter's head. Why don't you share it? I'm sure it's one of the obstacles to you leaving. Perhaps I can help to clear your doubts. The girl looked at her mother and, taking a deep breath, began her story. When Jenny entered the cafe, Selena was already there. A man stood up from the table where her friend was sitting and hurried to the bar. Are they coming over? She asked, winking at Jenny. Ah, Selena waved her hand. That's Frank, my new acquaintance. Jenny felt uneasy. You mean a new lover? What about Jacob? What about Buck? Jenny, you're becoming a prude. Get yourself a man and don't faint at the sight of my boyfriends. I'm not fainting. In fact, I'm not surprised that you have several lovers. But don't you think it's unfair to Buck? How do you get into bed with him after them? Jenny, he who knows less sleeps better. Or, what are you trying to say? Selena squinted her perfectly painted eyes. You want to tell Buck? Well, go ahead. Go. You think he'll believe you? Even if he did, he'd still forgive me. He loves me. I wasn't going to tell your husband anything. It's just that he happens to be my friend, and I'm ashamed to look him in the eye. Why are you ashamed? You're not his wife. Just because I'm covering for you, I'm betraying him. Oh, you're so tender. Jenny, forget it. This is my problem. Let's change the subject. What did you want to talk to me about? Jenny remained silent, realizing that it was useless to talk to Selena about her family. Is that what you wanted to talk about? Selena guessed. No, but what I wanted to talk about is no longer relevant. Good. Come on, I'll introduce you to Frank. And without waiting for her friend's answer, Selena waved her hands, urging the man behind the counter to come to their table. Frank, she cooed, this is my best friend Jenny. Jenny, this is Frank. Nice to meet you. Frank leaned gallantly into Jenny's hand. Likewise, the girl muttered and hurriedly pulled her hand away. Frank, not paying attention to the behavior of her friend, continued Selena, you do not have a friend like you. Because my friend is stuck at work, does not go anywhere, and it became boring as hell. We'll find one, the man said, unashamedly eyeing Jenny with an appraising look. Good, then why don't you and your friend take us out tonight? Selena sang out, smiling at Frank. That's a great idea. Jenny, a favor, tell Buck that you and I decided to have a girls' night out and went to the movies. I'm sorry, Selena, but I have other plans for tonight, Jenny said angrily. Her friend had decided that she could decide for her who to go with and where to go. And she's making her lie and defend her. No way. Hey, what are you doing? Selena looked at her friend in surprise. What's gotten into you? Then she got up from her chair and shook her head to the side. Come on, let's go have a private chat. Jenny followed her. What are you doing, friend? Are you trying to meddle in my private life again? Selena's voice was threatening. I think you're trying to invade my privacy. Jenny retorted. I didn't ask you to introduce me to an elderly womanizer and decide for me where to go tonight. You're not going to be of any use to anyone like that anytime soon. Jenny suddenly didn't care at all. She suddenly realized that she and Selena had been different people for a long time and that they were not meant to be together. I'm going, Selena, Jenny said tiredly and headed for the exit. Get out of here. She's playing the innocent sheep. I'll live without you somehow. Hi. After such a messy fight with Selena, Jenny wasn't surprised, but Buck showing up at her apartment was a surprise. Hi. Come on in. Jenny let the man into the hallway. Something wrong? A lot of things. Buck threw off his shoes and jacket and went into the kitchen. Jenny put the kettle on and looked at the man questioningly. I just found out today that you and Selena had a fight. Was it because I asked you to? No, in the last 2 weeks Jenny had already come to terms with the fact that she no longer had any friends. You know, she quit her job because she was bored in the office. She took a job at a nightclub as a receptionist. Now she disappears there all night. I'm glad she found a job she likes, Jeannie said quietly. Why is Buck here? We hardly ever see each other. She's been asking me to come, but I haven't really liked all those noisy parties lately. Still, it's hard to stay home alone. So, I thought I'd come see you. Do you mind? No, if I'm disturbing you, I'll leave. No, you're not disturbing me, Jenny said quietly. They walked through the park. Jenny was still hesitant to tell Buck about the job offer. She was afraid of his reaction and wanted his opinion. Today, Michael reminded her that she had a week to think about it, and exactly 1 week had passed since the night Buck had shown up on her doorstep. That night they had talked a lot, and the man had left well past midnight. She hadn't dared to tell him why she and Selena had quarreled, though Buck had urged her to do so. The next day Buck called her and asked her to have dinner with him. I'm not such a lover of company and entertainment, he laughed sadly into the phone, but I don't want to spend the evening alone. Jenny agreed. They had a wonderful time, having dinner in a quiet, cozy restaurant, and then walked through the park. Buck talked about his work, about funny things that had happened to him and his co-workers. Jenny listened and smiled. She was happy just to be near him, that she could hear his voice and sometimes touch his hand. They began to meet every day. They went to the movies, to cafes, walked in the park, and even visited the theater once. From time to time, Buck took her hand, and those were the happiest moments. She realized she was doing the wrong thing. That Buck was a married man and the husband of her, albeit former, friend. But she couldn't help herself. Yesterday, he walked her to her apartment and took her hands in his. They stood there in silence for a few seconds, looking into each other's eyes. Then Buck suddenly put his arms around her quickly and pressed his lips to hers. From surprise, Jenny first responded to his kiss, then pushed him away and ran into the apartment, locked herself in, and leaned back against the door. She could feel him still standing outside the door and tried not to breathe. It seemed like an eternity before footsteps were heard outside the door. Today Buck called her as if nothing had happened and asked her to meet him. At first she wanted to refuse, but then she changed her mind. What would it do? Doubt and reticence? No, better to dot all the I's and T's. They walked in silence down the alley. Each of them was thinking how to start a conversation. They started together. Yeah. Jenny didn't get a chance to say anything. I know she's cheating on me. His words hit her like a thunderclap. How? The girl whispered. So I was right. You knew everything. Buck's voice was not a drop of anger and irritation. Don't think. I'm not angry. You were best friends, and even when you quarreled, you kept quiet. I see. How long have you known? Almost as soon as it happened the first time. Of course she didn't tell me anything, but Selena couldn't hide her behavior, flirting without embarrassing me. At first, I couldn't believe such a blatant betrayal, but her frequent walks with you convinced me I was right. Were you following us? No, I just know you so well. You can't go to that many parties. She wasn't hiding from anyone. And people, unlike cheating spouses, see and hear everything. When Selena dumped Jacob, he came straight to me and insinuated that she was unfaithful. Buck, I think your spouse is cheating on you, he said. Did she leave you? I asked him. You should have seen the look in his eyes. By then, I was already aware of Selena's affairs. But why did you? Why? Jenny stopped and turned to the man. Asked you to talk to her? About the family? Yes. I'm sorry. Even though I knew you well, I didn't know you well enough. I thought you were either going to defend her and convince me that it was my fault she didn't want to settle down, or you were going to turn her in like a best friend to impress me and open my eyes. You've got an opinion about best friends, Jenny exclaimed. Sorry, other people's advice and opinions misled me. But Jenny was so offended by his words that she turned away and walked forward down the alley. Jenny, wait. Buck caught up with her and took her by the arm, forcing her to stop. I'm so sorry. I was a fool to think of you that way. It's just, a while ago I realized I didn't want a wife like Selena. I've been watching you and wishing I'd seen you in time. Although that night when you defended your diplomas, there was a doubt in me when I saw you, but the decision was already made at that point, and I decided not to go with my fleeting premonitions. Then we didn't see each other much, and I started to think I'd done the right thing until I found out about the affair. Buck, wait, let me finish. When I came to you and asked you to talk to Selena about our marriage, I had another goal in mind, to find out how you felt about me. And if you'd given Selena away, I would have filed for divorce and courted you without a doubt. And what did you find out? Jenny asked with an irritated grin. That you were completely indifferent to me, and you've decided to stay with Selena. No, we're getting a divorce at the moment. What do you mean? The news came out of the blue. I can't live with a woman who betrayed me, especially a woman I've fallen out of love with. What about Selena? Jenny was literally burning with curiosity. First, she didn't believe me when I told her I filed for divorce. Then she accused you of ratting her out. Then she said she wouldn't give me a divorce. Now she seems to have calmed down. Why didn't you say anything to me? To be honest, I wanted to tell you, but after the divorce, but I couldn't bear it. I wanted to see you so badly. You make me feel like I'm doing the right thing. Buck took a step toward Jeannie. What's that supposed to mean? She recoiled. Let me just see you. I'll wait as long as you'll let me, and I'll accept whatever you decide. Not believing what she was hearing, Jenny stood staring at Buck with rounded eyes. She berated herself for her gullibility and pliability, but she couldn't help it. For too long she had been around him and not been able to even touch him. Too long had she watched someone else's happiness. It was all too much. The day Buck told her he was getting a divorce and how he felt about her, she just ran away. She couldn't believe this was happening to her. That the man she'd secretly loved for so many years was reciprocating. She felt like she was dreaming. So when she got to the house, she locked herself in and tried to wake up. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Jenny sat there without moving. The bell rang again. On stiff legs, the girl went to the door and looked through the peephole. Buck. Why had he come? Why was he torturing her? But her hands were already unlocking the locks. As soon as the door opened, Jenny found herself in the man's arms. His passionate, demanding kisses robbed her of the strength to resist or think at all. They woke up when it was deep night outside the window. Jenny rushed to the bathroom, where she stood under the shower for a long time, trying to come to her senses and decide what to do next. Jenny, is everything all right in there? Buck's excited voice sounded outside the door. Open up, please. I'm worried. Jenny wrapped herself in towels and opened the door, carefully avoiding looking the man in the eye. But he embraced her and led her into the room, where a small table had already been set up, with a bottle of champagne at the head of it. At the surprised look of the girl, he explained, "Delivery from restaurants is available 24 hours a day." Then, seating Jenny on the couch, he poured them each a glass. "To you." He raised his glass. Jenny nodded and drank it down. A warmth spread through her body and the tension began to subside. "Jenny, I'm sorry." "For what?" If I had known you had never been with anyone before me, I would have been more careful. Good thing you didn't. Jenny grinned and held out her glass to him. Their gazes met, his happy and excitedly surprised and hers sad and thoughtful. Jenny, I feel like something's wrong. What's wrong, anyway? Did I hurt you? Did I hurt you? No, you didn't hurt me. I hurt myself. But how? I let my feelings get in the way. I couldn't control myself, and I let it all happen. You're still a married man. I understand you and Selena are going through a rough patch, and you need an outlet. I don't blame you. I'm the stupid fool who couldn't stop you. And myself. What are you talking about? I'm divorcing Selena because she betrayed me, and because I don't love her. I want to be with you. I'm the fool because I realized too late that I need you. I'll be free in a week and we'll get married. Or, do you regret it? I've got it all wrong. You're with me out of pity. No, Buck. I've loved you for a long time, but... Then there's no buts about it. He's got her in his arms. We're gonna get married and be together. I love you, and I'm not gonna let some cockroach in your pretty little head get in the way of that. The last week of the month she had been given to think about it was coming to an end. Jenny was preparing a speech for Michael. She had to convince him to send someone else to Indonesia so that it would not affect her career. She was sure that she would be able to come to an agreement with the chief, that she would be more useful with him. The sudden happiness and Buck's love gave her strength. Of course, the thought of leaving with her lover crept into her mind, but she wasn't sure he'd agree. Here he had a job he loved, a good position, and what was waiting for him in Indonesia. I doubt his engineering skills would be of much use there, and he couldn't, she was sure of it, be unemployed for long. And after a while he'd blame her for leaving him without his favorite job. No, she'd rather be fired. She could always get a part-time job translating. At least she could get a job at Buck's firm. He said their translators were worth their weight in gold. Or maybe she could quit the travel agency and move closer to her lover. Then they'd practically never be apart. This thought inspired Jenny, and she was no longer dreading the upcoming conversation with the chief. On day X, Jenny stood under the shower and sang. Buck was making breakfast in the kitchen. The feeling of boundless happiness suddenly made her want to be a little late for work. Without turning off the shower to surprise Buck, she threw on a towel and tiptoed out of the bathroom and into the kitchen. A man was talking angrily on the phone with someone. Jenny stopped so as not to distract him. Let him finish his conversation, and then she would help him improve his mood. So what, that you're pregnant? Jenny turned cold. We're getting a divorce, and I don't care about your situation. Jenny quietly turned around and ran to the bathroom. Closing the doors behind her, she leaned against them and cried silently. Not only was she infatuated with a married man, but he was about to be a father, and from what she had heard, not a very good one. He doesn't care about his child, and the mother of his child. No, Jenny believed Buck loved her. A man can't be like that if he doesn't love, but that love leaves two people unhappy, one of whom is an innocent baby. No way, she's not gonna let that baby grow up without a father. It's their own fault for letting their feelings get out too quickly. It was time to hide them deep inside again and never show them again. Calmly, Jenny walked out of the bathroom. Buck was thoughtful, but he put her breakfast down and poured her coffee. Jenny, I have to go somewhere after work. Can you get home alone? Yes, of course. Jenny tried to look nonchalant. Did something happen? Just a little misunderstanding. Wow, turns out the baby's a little misunderstanding. Jenny suddenly felt uncomfortable. Trying to hide her squeamishness at such words, she stood up from the table. I'll drive myself to work too, okay? All right. She gave Buck a quick kiss and ran out into the hallway. Hurry, hurry, he's gonna find out about this. Michael, may I? Come on in, Jeannie. The chief smiled. Are you here to tell me your decision? Yes, I'm taking off today. Jeannie stretched out in the wicker chair. A warm, soothing breeze was blowing in from the ocean, as if whispering, you did the right thing. It had been a little over a year since her escape. In that time, she had almost calmed down, and the memories of Buck were no longer so painful in her heart. She was sure she had done the right thing. Too quickly, she had given in to her feelings without letting Buck's family be dealt with. She didn't regret what had happened. She had been happy, albeit briefly, but those memories would warm her for the rest of her life. She had learned what it was to love and be loved. Too hasty. Well, what's done is done. She knew she had done the right thing by moving away from her love and giving Buck the opportunity to be a good father. The birth of a child was to reunite the family of her former friend Selena and the man she loved. Perhaps, after becoming a mother, Selena would settle down and become the good and loving wife that Buck had dreamed of. Michael was not deceived. She was given a rent-free home of her own choosing, a small but cozy chalet overlooking the ocean, and a small car for trips around the island. The first months of hard work left no room for unhappy thoughts. Jenny hardly slept at all while working on the opening of the branch. She got to know the representatives of their travel agency personally, accompanying them in their work and observing them. She traveled to all the hotels with which they had contracts, talked to tourists, during which she found out that some of the representatives of the travel agency were unscrupulous in their duties and overcharged them, contrary to the terms and conditions. She found suitable premises and rented them. I thoroughly reviewed the personnel files and personally talked to each of them. A month later, the staff of the branch was renewed, trained, and began to fulfill their duties. At first, there were some shortcomings here and there that had not been noticed before. Jenny fixed them, corrected them, and moved on. After 8 months, the branch brought in the expected profit for the first time. The system was working like a well-oiled machine, bringing her satisfaction and pride, and her bosses increasing profits. She could exhale, but not relax. Jenny knew that if she let her guard down, her subordinates would feel it, and she would have to start all over again. Still, she felt better. That's when her memories came back to her. And if during the day she was so absorbed in her work that she thought of nothing but her work, at night her memory brought her back to the days when she had been so happy. In order not to return to the state of despair in which she had been when she came to the island, Jenny made a vow to herself that she would think of Buck only 1 hour before going to bed, and only of the good things between them. "Mistress Jenny, there's someone here to see you." Kahaya, the au pair, entered the living room. Kahaya was an Indian woman, born into a poor, if not impoverished family. She and her husband had moved to Indonesia in search of a better life. But even here, things didn't work out. The couple could barely make ends meet with casual labor. Kahaya went to offices, offering her services as a cleaner and laundress. Her husband, Surya, was working on the plantations for a pittance from morning till night. The day Kahaya entered Jenny's newly opened office was the happiest day of her life. The young foreigner not only gave her a job in the office, but after watching the woman carefully and gladly fulfill all her wishes, she offered her a permanent job in her home. After learning that the assistant's husband was working his ass off on the plantations, Jenny invited him to her house and offered him a job as a driver on a tourist bus. The previous driver had been leaking fuel, so Jenny fired him. Surya gladly accepted. They settled near the shawl of their new mistress and began each morning by praying for her health. Jenny was pleased with her new employees. The only thing they could not fulfill was calling her by her first and middle names. After much study and agony, they settled on Mrs. Jenny. Soon all the subordinates began to call Jenny by that name. After a little thought, she gave in. Gunter must have decided to work on his day off, thought Jenny, and got up from her chair to greet her deputy. She liked Gunter at once for his efficiency, diligence, education, and business acumen. He helped her understand the mentality of the natives, translated words from the dialect she did not understand, pointed out flaws she did not notice, and was devoted to her with all his heart. And it was not surprising. A boy from a poor family, no matter how miraculously he managed to get an education, would never occupy such a position with his richer countrymen. By all means, Gunter tried to convince his boss that she had not entrusted him with such a position for nothing. She could wake him up at any time of the day or night, and he was happy to go to the other side of the island to fulfill her errands. If one of the workers did not come to work, he was ready to replace him, while finding out the reason for the absence. Gunter dealt with insolent workers in such a way that they became quieter than water, lower than grass. Under his watchful eye, the accounting of the branch was so transparent that even Jenny, who was not very close to it, could understand all the calculations and amounts. Jenny smiled broadly and looked at the person who had entered. "You." The smile slid off her pale face. Kahaya, seeing the condition of her mistress, asked excitedly, "Mrs. Jenny, should I call the police? I'll call my husband right now." "Don't do that, Kahaya," Jenny squeezed out. "This is my friend. It's just that he came uninvited. Get us some coffee." Kahaya, glancing warily at the guest, left. Jenny stared silently at the man standing across from her, unable to utter another word. It was as if these months had never happened. It was as if that hopeless pain had never gone away. She went back to the day she'd heard him on the phone. Her heart was torn apart with despair again. "Well, hello, Jenny." Buck broke the long silence. "Hello, Buck. We better part ways." He reread the note again and could not understand a word of it. Break up with whom? Why? Why would it be better? The meeting with Selena had driven him white hot. He rushed to Jenny's room to hug her and calm down. He couldn't wait to forget this conversation like a bad dream and be glad that he was finally rid of the traitor. Selena was waiting for him at her club. It had been 2 months since they'd seen each other, but she changed a lot. If before she was a beautiful coquette, now she had turned into a vulgarly dressed woman with provocatively bright makeup and a lustful look. "Hi, Buck." She sang out and tried to kiss him, but Buck pulled away. Selena wasn't embarrassed, and she patted the seat next to her and asked, "Would you like a drink?" "No, thanks. What did you want?" "Did I want?" "No, honey, you wanted it." Buck stared at her in silence, and Selena continued, "You wanted a real family. You're gonna get one now." "Not with you." "With who?" "I'm still your wife. We'll be divorced next week." "I don't think so. A judge won't deprive a pregnant woman of her husband." Selena smiled charmingly and flapped her heavily painted eyelashes. "I didn't get you pregnant, and I can safely prove it by sending you for tests." "Come on, Buck. Who cares who got me pregnant? The important thing is that we have a complete real family. After all, the father is not the one who gave birth, but the one who raised it. I'm sure you'll be a wonderful father." Buck was starting to boil. Selena, apparently, was firmly convinced that he would gladly accept her child and raise it. "You've got some nerve." "Selena, I'm divorcing you. I don't want your child. Let him be raised by his father." "Go to him. His father is a married man, and he doesn't need children on the side. But he does need mistresses." "Come on, Buck." "That's it, Selena. That's enough. I'm not going to live with a cunt and raise her bastard children. If you don't give me a divorce, I'll have to demand a DNA test, and then all your friends and family will know what a bitch you are. Although, I wouldn't be surprised if they already know. You know, hide your affairs." No one was home. Turning on the light in the hallway, Buck noticed a note on the dresser. "We better break up." Without undressing, he went into the room, sat down on the couch, and stared at the piece of paper. Why? What had happened? Had Jenny suddenly realized she didn't love him? Had it all been temporary and she cooled off so quickly? He dialed her number over and over again, but the caller was unavailable. Buck jumped up and stormed out of the apartment. An hour later, he was ringing the doorbell at Jenny's parents' house. I wondered myself why everything was in such a hurry. Jenny's mom was hustling around Buck, pouring him tea, slicing cake. She called from work and said she was leaving in a couple hours, that she'd explain everything later. Didn't you know she'd been offered a job in Indonesia? No, she didn't tell me anything. Do you know where exactly she's going? How could I? Even her superiors don't know. She said she was given the right to choose any location and she'll decide where to stay. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as I find out. But why didn't she tell me? The woman just shrugged her shoulders. The next day, Buck was in the office where Jeannie worked. Alas, young man, we haven't heard from her yet. Michael waved his hands. You'll come back in a month. We'll know her exact location then. What month? Buck paced around his office and didn't know what to do. He called Jeannie's mother. She still didn't know anything. Calm down, Buck. It's not gonna do any good to go on rushing around like this. Just be patient. I'll call you as soon as I know something. The man hung up the phone and thought, what's the real reason he's floundering? If she didn't want to be with him, why bother her? He jumped up again and ran around the office. But why run off like that without saying a word, without talking, without explaining himself? He would have understood. No, he wouldn't have understood. He wouldn't have left her until she came back to him. Maybe that's why she left without saying anything. Was she afraid of his reaction? Buck had calmed down by evening. First, he would deal with Selena, then he would look for Jenny. To Buck's amazement and indignation, Selena said in court that she was expecting a child and didn't want to leave it fatherless. When Buck demanded a DNA test, she said it would be dangerous for the baby and she would not allow it. The court sided with Selena and postponed the divorce hearing until the birth of the child. In the evening of the same day, Selena arrived at Buck's home, saying that she had quit her job and would be preparing for the upcoming birth, and now he was obliged to support her. Barely restraining himself from dragging her out the door by the scruff of her neck, Buck gritted his teeth. "All right, Liv, I'll provide you with food and necessary medicines if the doctor prescribes them, but you won't get a dime of money from me. You'll be out of here like a cork." Selena stretched her lips in a smile. She knew how to make a man fall in love and pay, but the smile began to slip from her face when she saw Buck packing. "Where are you going?" "I'm staying with friends. You didn't think I'd want to share an apartment with you, did you? You're just afraid you can't stand me," Selena shrieked. Buck just shook his head and walked out the door. Selena decided she could do just fine without Buck. After all, she's a beautiful woman with an instant attraction for men. "Hello, Kitty. How about we get together tonight?" "Sorry, I'm busy." "Pookie, your baby misses you. I hear you're pregnant." "I'm sorry, but I have no desire to date women who are pregnant." "What's wrong with that?" Short beeps. "We want to see our daddy." "Selena, I told you I don't want this baby. I have a wife to procreate with. In fact, don't call me again." "Baby, who are you?" "Are you crazy?" "I'm Selena. I met you last weekend at the club." "Oh, is she the one who's pregnant and about to hang someone else's baby on her husband?" "Sorry, I begged. It's nothing personal, but I prefer younger girls. And you're like this. Drunken mistake. Bye." Selena hung up the phone and stared at it dumbfounded. What does all this mean? Is she asleep? She had just been sent away by all her lovers. How could this even happen? She picked up the phone again to make the call. "Oh, Selena, hi. We're having such a party. Come on over." "Oh, thank God. At least she's still welcome somewhere." Selena hurriedly started packing. "Yeah, who knew a fun, agile girl could grow up to be such a badass?" Betty carefully refilled Buck's tea. "Have you heard from Jeannie?" Buck didn't care about his wife. He was sitting at Vasilisi's parents' house. After he left home, Buck first headed for the hotel, not wanting to embarrass his friends with his presence. At the door of the inn, he suddenly met Betty, Jenny's mom. "What are you doing here, Buck?" The woman was surprised. "What are you doing here?" Buck answered rudely with a question. "I was visiting a friend and decided to take a walk," ignoring the man's tone of voice to Betty. "I'm moving." "To a hotel?" The woman looked at the young man in surprise. Blurred eyes, gaunt, tired look. "Come on, let's go and have some coffee." She took him under her arm and dragged him to the nearest cafe. Buck didn't resist. Ordering a cup of coffee, Betty ordered, "Tell me." Whether it was the tension of the last few days or the despair of being separated from Guinea, but Buck laid it all out. About his broken family life, about Selena's cheating, about his love for Jenny, about his too long thinking, which led to his beloved's escape and pregnancy by another wife who wouldn't give him a divorce. Betty listened to him almost without interrupting, only occasionally asking clarifying questions about his confusing story. "Buck, forget the hotel. Go to Jeannie's. Her apartment's empty anyway." Buck refused at first, but then decided it would be better. From that day on, he went to visit Jeannie's parents, hoping that the girl would someday reveal her whereabouts. "She called the other day, but I couldn't find out where she was, and she wouldn't mention you." Buck sighed heavily. If it hadn't been for this situation with Selena's pregnancy, he wouldn't have hesitated to go looking for Jeannie. He would have traveled all over Indonesia to find her. That wouldn't be necessary. It's just a matter of finding out the location of the branch and the address of the manager. "I think she somehow found out about Selena's pregnancy and decided to give your family a chance," Betty suggested. "What chance? I didn't get Selena pregnant. She and I didn't sleep together for months before I started dating Jenny. I'd sooner believe Jeannie was pregnant." "Oh, don't worry about it. It'll work out. I'd assure you, Jeannie loved you and will understand. But you have to deal with your own problems first. You don't start a new relationship before you finish the old one. Once you've cleared the eyes with Selena, then go to Jeannie for a new life." "I'm afraid Selena will do anything to keep me as her husband." "Well, you better figure out a way to make sure that doesn't happen." "Who's the big fat one?" Selena struggled to get her eyes open and looked at the man who had spoken. A huge, chubby man of indeterminate age with a huge red nose on a puffy face was looming over her. He smelled so foul that the woman immediately felt nauseous. Pushing the man away, Selena rushed in search of the bathroom. She found it with difficulty and stood over the sink for a long time. When the seizure passed, she looked in the mirror. Disheveled hair, smudged mascara, no clothes. She was what? With this. Selena leaned against the sink again. Wrapping herself in a towel, the woman stepped out of the bathroom and looked around. Quite a decent apartment, just not cleaned. The man was wearing only shorts. A huge hairy potbelly protruded no worse than Selena's own. Here, drink up. The man handed her a glass with some liquid in it. It'll make you feel better. Selena grimaced and looked for water. How did she end up here? As if answering her silent question, the man said good-naturedly, "We met you at the club. Me and Richard. We had a joke. Moms-to-be also want to relax. Then we went to my place here. We had another drink and your friend went off with Richard and you stayed with me. You know, I love pregnant women. Can you take me home?" Selena's voice was giving me a headache. Come on. What are you doing there? You said yourself that your husband doesn't care about you." The fat man smiled good-naturedly. "Stay. I'll take care of you. I can see how bad you feel. I like pregnant women. Baby doll, I understand, but I don't want someone else's baby, and I don't want you to have one with the way you live when you're pregnant." The next time Selena woke up, she was already in the hospital room. Her head ached again, her mouth tasted of metal, and her lower abdomen felt completely empty. Finally, a familiar voice sounded somewhere nearby. She turned her head with difficulty and saw Edward. "Where am I?" she whispered with dry lips. "At the hospital. I searched the whole park before I found you. You were in a terrible state. You were beaten up, bleeding badly. What's up? Did you have a good time?" Selena turned away and cried. She spent 2 months in the hospital. After what happened, the baby didn't survive. The chance of getting pregnant again was slim. Edward visited her in the hospital faithfully and tried to cheer her up. After she was discharged, he took her back to his house. A couple months later, the court held a trial where Selena signed the divorce papers without a word. Now she stayed at home, and even Edward did the grocery shopping. Every night, she waited anxiously for him to come home from work, afraid that instead of going home, he would go to a club where he would pick up a younger and more promising girl to have children with. This night, Edward was late. Selena dialed his cell phone again and again, but it was unavailable. She began to shake, tears rolling from her eyes, and suicidal thoughts ran through her head. She didn't hear the key turn as she sobbed. A surprised and frightened Edward rushed over to her. "Selena, what's wrong?" "You're not here. Your phone's not answering." "I thought what happened?" She could hardly speak from sobbing. "What's going to happen to me? The phone's dead, and here I am." Edward began frantically rifling through his pockets. Finally, he found what he was looking for. "I came for this." There was a ring in the palm of his large hand. Selena stared at the ring. "What are you doing? Are you, proposing to me?" "Yes," Edward smiled embarrassedly. "Why do we have to live like this? You're a free woman now. But I probably won't be able to give birth to you, will I?" "Yes, you can. We'll cure you. The long, painful wait has come to an end. He's free. All he has to do is quit his job, buy the tickets, and what if she rejects you? What if she's been married a long time?" Buck's friend Austin tried to talk him out of it. "Why don't you take a vacation first? Go out, do some research, make some inquiries. What if she's already married to a native and raising a couple of mulatto babies?" According to her mom, Jenny didn't do anything like that. What if she was careful to hide it from her mom? Why? What's the point of hiding her grandchildren from her grandmother, even if they are from a man of color? Her mother is a wonderful woman who has no color prejudice. Still, I wouldn't be in such a hurry to get fired if I were you. It's no big deal. If Jeannie doesn't want to see me, or if she's already married, I'll go back and find another job. I'm not bad at it after all. Suit yourself. Buck stood in front of a small 2-story building, the first floor of which was a European-type cafe. The second floor was a branch of Jeannie's travel agency. Despite it being a day off, the cafe had few customers. He entered, ordered a cup of coffee, and addressed the bartender, hoping that he knew English. Buck did not speak any other languages. "Excuse me, but why so few guests?" "It's the rainy season." Luckily, the bartender knew English. The rainy season is about to start. Tourists don't like it. Buck nodded his head and sipped his coffee. He didn't know how to get the conversation to the director of the travel agency above the cafe, but the director suddenly helped him. "Are you by any chance an American?" the bartender asked. "Yes, how did you know?" Buck was surprised. "Oh, I'm a good judge of foreigners, especially when they start talking," smiled the bartender. "And thanks to my new neighbor," the bartender pointed to the ceiling, "I can recognize Americans right away. You seem to be so intelligent, scientists, but there is something primitive in you. It's barely perceptible, but it's there." "Interesting." Buck shook his head. "Then I am very lucky that your neighbor is American. I'm not very good with languages, and I'd like to see the country and the places I'm interested in, not the places that tourists see." "You're in the right place. Ms. Jenny is a customer-oriented person. She has something for everyone." "Good, then I won't delay." Satisfied with his cunning, Buck climbed down from his high chair. "I'm afraid you're not going to make it tonight." The bartender stopped him. "Why not?" "It's Mrs. Jenny's day off. Her deputy is there in her place, but he doesn't handle such individual matters." "It's okay. I'll try to make a deal." Buck was met by a friendly young man who spoke good Russian. "What can I do for you?" "I need Jeannie," Buck said kindly, but at the same time demanding. "Mrs. Jenny is off today, but I assure you, you can trust me completely," the young man answered without the slightest embarrassment. "I'm a friend of Jenny's, and I'd like to talk to her personally." The smile on the boy's face was replaced by disbelief. Then Buck pulled out his phone and showed him some pictures of Jenny with her parents, with him and Selena. "Okay, I'll explain how to get to her house," the young man agreed slightly uncertainly. 10 minutes later, Buck was speeding down the highway to the ocean in a rental car. She was even more beautiful. The light tan and local clothes suited her well. Buck admired her as she recovered from his appearance. "Hello, Jenny." He wanted to run to her, grab her in his arms and kiss her until she collapsed in his arms and answered him. "Hello, Buck." Jenny was struggling with contradictory feelings. She wanted to throw herself at his neck and chase him away, but instead she asked, "How did you find me?" "It was easier than waiting for the day I could see you. You waited a long time." "I'm sorry. I'll tell you everything and explain everything, if you let me." They talked into the evening. Jeannie started crying now and then laughing, then crying and laughing again. Buck hugged her, comforted her, kissed her and laughed. A worried Kahaya looked into the living room from time to time and didn't know what to do. Finally, unable to bear it, she ran after her husband and excitedly asked him to observe the guest. One look was enough for Surya to realize everything. He gently put his arm around her shoulders and drew her away from the drawing room door. "My dear, it's as clear as a palm. It is our mistress's lover, from whom she fled here, and he found her. I don't think you should go to work tomorrow morning, and leave early today. Don't disturb the lovers." Kahaya didn't believe it, but when she returned to the living room to ask when dinner would be served, her mistress Jeannie was passionately kissing the man who had arrived. 5 years later. "Tell me, Buck, does yours squawk over the kids like mine does? Even I can only play with my own son under her supervision. But first, I have to shower, shave, and use odorless antiseptic on my hands." Edward grunted unhappily and sipped a little beer from his glass. "I even started drinking less because, you see, it's bad for the baby to smell your breath." "What's the smell?" "With a glass of beer. And the stronger stuff. I can't remember when I've had one." "Selena's understandable. Your son's been too hard on her. That's why she's worried about him." Buck looked for Jeannie. Her spouse was snoozing peacefully in the chaise lounge, leaving the care of the twins to the grandparents. Selena and Kahaya were passionately discussing sunscreen for the children, keeping a wary eye on Selena's son and Kahaya's daughter. Mistress Jenny. Gurram came out onto the mini beach belonging to Jenny and Buck, with a wide smile as always. "Let's go to the table. The meat is ready." Everyone scurried about. Selena, shushing Edward, picked up her son and rushed towards the chala. Surya took his daughter by the hand and hugged his wife, heading towards the house. The twins followed, holding onto the long hem of their grandmother's skirt. Jenny and Buck were at the back of the small group. The man hugged his wife and tried to walk as slowly as possible. "Buck, do you want everyone waiting for us?" Jenny stopped. "Just a little." He pulled her against him and kissed her with a long kiss. Then, pulling away, he said, How good it is that life has put everything in its proper place. How good it is that we are together. I love you. I love you too.